And of course, we do, where it's trying to finish it. And of course, 2 months back. It just, it's been, don't do it.
You don't have to do at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One at a time.
Position.
You know, it takes. I just finished this all night. Yeah, I would sleep in the chair. Oh, I've never slept. At first, it was tough. My sister and brother came home. I barely, again, it's been a long. And the doctor finally did it. I have no idea. Oh, thank you. Rich, I'm going to just make sure you don't do anything that I never asked you. No, but don't forget how's it going. What you got? Yeah, that's cool. It's streaming.
I was really impressed with these guys.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that. I actually put out 2 emails to people I know that have worked with one guy. I didn't realize until when I was getting ready to leave, Dean came up to me and asked me if I knew this one person. I said, yeah. And he said, oh, he said, he's partners with us on his projects. Okay. He said, give him a call. Okay. Well, I haven't called him. I reached out. I emailed both of them. The other guys in New York State Assembly.
I would like to be included.
I think you got one on the table there. Okay. You can have the gavel too. I think it's fine. Move this chair back. Yeah, Liz is not going to be here until 2:30. So.
Oh, we'll be done by then.
It could happen. We can always hope.
I like it. It's well, actually parking it can be because like you're backing out into like every traffic. I do think we should lower the speed limit to 25.
She's terrible.
I never thought I would be
Discuss that.
lowering speed limit to that.
I think it would be.
Do you know they lowered the speed limit between Lake Placid and Wilmington that through the gorge? They lowered it from 55 to 45. Now people are even slower. It drives me crazy.
That would be a sort of a typical thing to do. No.
There's no business there.
Close to reality as you can get.
Yeah, it's a struggle.
I'm trying to live away from 87. Right now it takes me about 3 minutes to get to 87.
Right. You're still not going to make your number. Yeah. You're right. Oh, that's right.
We'll pick her up at her house, 20 minutes. To go to Lane or out around that, it takes me longer to go there than it does to go to Champlain.
You golf?
Oh, yeah. Try.
I'm not going to golf in 2 years. My biggest problem is I just read 4 hours to be able to get home. But I'm a rising shiner golfer. I like to get there like.
Yeah. I think
we've got some changes to recommend.
I don't like that you have to use it.
But, you know,
all right. It's your meeting. Running that part of the show, you may have. Councilor Kelly, I don't think Councilor Gibbs is able to make it right away.
So 2:30, she said.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It is like I'm not.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Common Council, specifically to work on our 2019 budget and hopefully finalize that today. So we'll start with a roll call.
Should we do pledge first? Pledge of allegiance, or?
Yes, we should. Sorry about that.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Mayor Reed?
Present.
Counselor Armstrong?
Here.
Counselor Kelly?
Here.
Counselor Gibbs? Counselor Enzel?
Here.
Counselor McFarland?
I'm here.
Counselor Moore?
Here.
Okay, at this point in the meeting, we'd like to invite members of the public to come talk to us about the 2019 budget or anything related to it. Seeing no one, we'll continue and we'll start our budget work session. We haven't really had a chance to talk about what it is we hope to accomplish here and how we're going to do it. So I would defer to Mr. Marks and ask him to explain to us how he would like to proceed today.
Okay, what's on the screen right here is what was adopted as the mayor's budget back in August. There's all this detailed worksheets. Basically, we can get down to this level. This is where the detailed expense and revenues are. The bottom line on this budget at that time was a surplus of $729,934.47.
What page is that, Mr. Mark?
That'd be on page 17 of the mayor's budget for the general fund.
Okay.
Okay, now, what I worked on this morning, and actually didn't take enough time to get it all done, I'm not sure if I am all done, was the update to, or from the mayor's budget. Here's the requested, which is what you saw in that report that was published. I didn't make any changes when we rolled it forward to the mayor's level. That's in this next column. Can everybody see that all right, by the way?
Yes. Yeah.
Is that, that's not
That's
too big,
better.
is it?
Nope.
A little better. All right, now we're at the council levels where we're rolling forward. All right, I'm going to zoom down to the bottom line. The number we just looked at before was a surplus of $729,934.47. After the changes I've implemented this morning, our surplus is higher. For two main reasons. We had a contingency of $600,000 in the mayor's budget, in the requested budget.
Right.
For a one-time expense for paying out the fire increases, the retroactive pay. That's already done. That's now in the 2018 numbers.
What was that final tally, Richard, do you know?
The pay was $435,000, and with benefits, you gotta add, say, 39% benefits on top of that.
So we're looking at 162,000 on top of that? Maybe 165,000?
That's why that contingency.
605,000
605
be the total.
total?
That was a pretty good estimate as far
Yeah.
as the contingency. So now that that's out of there, what I've done is I've gone and updated, haven't changed any of the revenue items. And it's pretty easy to see by comparison that everything is still the same. You know, we have an estimate for sales tax that we're leaving alone. The property taxes are only 2% higher in this case. Other big revenue items, refuse, I think, you know, we're finishing off this year at about 660,000, so we're gonna have to take a look at that and see if we should reduce that. The ambulance revenue we have at 750,000, excuse me, 725,000, I think is a good projection. And Scott Wallace and I have compared notes on that. The only thing we have to keep in mind is, I don't know if we budgeted, Scott's gonna have to tell me what's in this line item. For contract services, which was the question last night. We were $64,000 over on that line item from the 2018 budget, but of course that represents the multi-med ambulance billing commissions of about $5,000 to $6,000 a month. So that's what's thrown that account over. So I don't know, Scott, if you've actually budgeted something in that line for multi-med for next year or not. Because the budget, 97,800 look pretty consistent. Yes. The mayor's budget. Okay, was added on?
Yes, it was added on.
Okay, contract services in 17 was actually 29.5. What I did was I jumped back to the mayor's budget, which shows the actual in the 18 budget, and shows what we were projecting for this year, which is where there's $60,000 over.
$60,000 over or 25
Last
over?
night's number that I showed you was 64,000, the budget adjustment for 18. You asked, what's that overage for?
The overage, right.
That was for the multi-med. So
But I'm just looking at, in the 2018 actual is 60,400.
at that
but
time,
it-
it's
okay.
back in August.
Okay.
Keep in mind,
Right.
this report is dated back in August.
Okay.
It's not even close to where we are right now.
Okay, that was mine.
So anyway, 97,008 looks like it's upgraded. Good. All right, so back to the mayor's budget, or excuse me, the council level budget at this point. We do have 97.8 still budgeted in there, which includes the multi-med commission billings.
What does that mean, multi-med commission billing?
That's the name of the company, Multi-Med. They do ambulance billing.
Oh.
We used to do it ourselves internally. Now they're doing it outside, and we're paying them $5,000 to $6,000 a month in commissions to do it. So the revenue's gone up, the rates have gone up, the billing is more precise and it's more efficient, but we're paying a commission to get that done. On the other hand, the person we were paying full-time in the fire department to do the ambulance billing is now part-time and temporary. So there's a trade-off there too with that expense. And Scott, I think you spend a lot less time on ambulance issues, billing issues, that is. You concentrate on the medical side of it.
Right.
So anyway, this is good news. That after I've taken an
Sorry,
increase.
Richard, to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt. Scott, Richard just mentioned that the person that was handling the billing, that we now contract out, they're now part-time?
Yes.
What are their responsibilities as part-time?
All my administrative work needs to be done, all the payroll, scheduling, anything that comes up.
Okay, thank you.
So I know I'm jumping up and down here fast, but the good news is with getting rid of the contingency and making sure that the revenues are consistent with 18's levels and higher where they should be, and increasing the payrolls for all of the raises that the fire got and all the anticipated raises that everybody else is going to get, our surplus went up over $200,000. Now what I did for the expenses across the board is what the mayor recommended. Since everybody's been informed that 1.5% is the cost of living allowance they're going to get in raises, I included an increase for not only the police, excuse me, not only the fire, which we know has happened. Now the fire increase, I know I'm jumping around, but let me go down to that. The fire increase is substantial because it represents about 12.4% in total increases. That's the budgeting in the 2 years of 2% each for 12 and 13, and the settlement contract of 1.3, 1.1, 1.1, 1.5, 1.5, and 1.5 through the end of 2019. Adds up to 12.5%. That's budgeted in the payroll line item. As you can see the difference. It's in the overtime, and it's also in the separation pay. But across the board, I added 1.5% based on the mayor's recommendation for the AFSCME contract people that affect every payroll account in the general fund, all the way back up to the mayor's budget. You can see it's a small increase. That would include any clerical increases. The finance department, see the difference. And once again, I've done it across the board for regular pay and overtime pay. And city clerk, and so forth and so on. And as well on the police lines, which are right here. So that represents 1.5% increase in all of their payroll items. Now, correspondingly, you have to increase the bottom section of the budget, the Social Security, the retirement, those increases.
Compared to
Other than that, I haven't changed anything else except for election expense, which I now went up from 32,000 to 44,410, I believe.
Decline in many cases.
Yeah, 44,100. So those are the changes I was able to make this morning in the 2 hours that I got to work on this.
So
Do
just
we
to
know
clarify-
what the increase, why the increase, such a large increase in the election?
Well, there was 3 elections. I'm just guessing.
No, I mean, this is for 19, or
This is for 19.
18, the projection.
Oh.
So 17, there was 43,000. The budget for 18 was 41,002. You know, another full year election expense, I guess, is what they're projecting for 44.1. I get that number from
And that came from the county, right?
county. Greg Campbell allocates that across all the towns and villages in the city, throughout the whole county.
So for 2019, just to go through the list here, you've got the firefighters' pay increase in there,
Yep.
and the 207A increase.
207A I haven't adjusted yet. We're gonna have to take a look at
What's
that.
that?
Didn't have time to look at that today.
Firefighters, they also increases. And you've got the elections increase in there.
The supplemental fire is right here. So let's just say, for instance, that they're gonna enjoy the same increases, and we budget 156,812 times 1.1244. That'll go up to 176,288, 20,000. So that's not gonna be a big impact, but you know, that will have to be put in there. So I have to take time to look at that number. There's a retro piece that's gonna have to be paid too, because this goes back to 2014 for people who have gone off 207A, but were on there back then. I think there was about 8 people on at that time. Now we're down to 5.
So that would
All
bring
the
the
retro.
council budget down to about 914.
But all the retro is taken out of 2018 budget though, right? Not
It's
the
all in.
2019.
That 600,000 we put in there for the impact of the fire retro. It's all in 18. And like I said, it was about a $600,000 total impact when you look at benefits as well as the pay. The pay was $435,000.
We should need to anticipate a police and an AFSCME contract for.
They were in there. Those are
You
in
got
these
that
numbers.
for
They're
the increases for that?
Every
okay.
payroll account's been adjusted for that.
At 1.5.
At one.
And,
1.5.
but the
At
retro
1.5%.
though, the retro
Except
too
for,
though.
except for managers. Haven't touched managers' pay. Everybody else is going up 1.5 except for managers.
But there'll be retro for the police for 2 years.
Didn't get a chance to calculate that yet.
I think we'd estimate that about 210,000, but that's just a one-time. It won't be an ongoing expense.
So that could go back into the contingency.
I think we could ask me might be about 15,000 retro because they're not as far along out of contract.
So then that would put us back down to about the same surplus where we were.
Okay.
What was the last
How much
item
did
that
you
said,
project
Colin?
for ASME?
AFSCME.
The AFSCME contract is up as well, so there'll be a little bit of retro for them as well.
That one expired at the end of June of 18.
Right, so there's only 6
And-
months of retro.
Police is at the end of 16.
Right. It'll be 2 years for them.
Yeah. So we could put that back in the contingency line, which we estimated, what, 215 for the two of those combined?
225 for the two combined. Yeah.
So we'll put that back in that line.
And then, but then we had firefighter interest, additional $26,000 you calculated.
That's all been accrued
Okay.
in 2018.
Okay.
Um,
Even the firefighter interest partly into 2019 because the payment hasn't actually been made out yet, made yet for the.
I didn't put anything in for that, no. I booked 118,000 as additional pay to the accrual that we had, and 57,000 as additional interest. We had 777, so we're putting in another 118 and another 57 to take us up to 952 is the accrued liability for that, and that's 175,000 additional is expensed in 18. The 777 was already expensed in 17.
I think you calculated additional firefighter interest of around 26,000 for next year, if I recall. Assuming that that payment is made probably mid-year, if I recall.
That'd be about right, because 57,000 is the whole year. Yeah. If you want to add that into the contingency, we can.
Yeah, probably wise to do so, yeah.
So,
And that is, for the rest of the council, as you know, we put aside the money for the retro for the firefighter arbitration, but the standard is to pay 9% interest on that. That's a court specified interest rate. So in some sense, we'd like to just pay it out early if it's due because we're not incurring interest. Our cost of capital is way lower than 9%. But we have to do it based on the timing of the proceedings.
okay, so,
And then I guess one last thing that we had talked about earlier is we have to figure out what the expected level of police and firefighter overtime will be next year. As you know, they're quite high this year, so we have to have a reasonable estimate for what we would expect for next year as well. I think that's going to be a little bit crystal balling we'll have to do to figure that out. But as you know, that's a pretty expensive item this year.
the police is now budgeted at 219,240, and that's up from 216 because of the 15%, or the 1.5% increase, as well as the separation pay. Fire, I did the same thing. It's up to 309. But the fire overtime actually ended 2018. 2018 was 400, and I can't access that file with budget adjustments through this because I don't have a share on this computer to get those work files. But I think it was 450,000
Yeah, that's what I recall.
for the fire overtime.
So
So that's $141,000 over budget on overtime.
Yeah, so do we assume that that's going to be the case next year and raise that overtime budget quite a bit, or is there something we can correct for next year
Well,
to
I
get it
would
down
hope
to
so.
309? Yeah.
That's a good question. So, what I wanted to do right here, right now,
I would say we should probably increase it, but not to the level that we paid this year.
Well, do we have a strategy to make sure that we don't regret that halfway through the year, though? So I think we need to have
We don't want to do
some
another transfer to it.
discussion.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I said that we maybe increase that figure, the 310 figure, increase that, the overtime figure that we're anticipating, but not at the same level that we paid to the 450,000 that we paid.
So what gives us reason to believe, though, that it won't be
Well,
50,000?
because you said that perhaps we can come up with some.
Right. So can we get overtime down to?
Well, what drives, what drove the overtime at the fire department?
And if you wouldn't mind coming forward, just for the benefit of anybody who watches the stream.
The overtime was driven by unforeseen injuries, also staffing levels being lowered and not hiring until later on in the year. We also had some of the injuries were drivers. of the fire engines, and that's a special qualification that they have to have, and we just can't put anybody in the seat of a truck and let them drive and operate the pumps. So we're put into place a system this year to get more drivers qualified. So we're working on that, and hopefully I don't have any injuries of numbers.
So what do you think is most likely level of overtime for next year, given all the various factors?
I think that we can lower it. That's,
From
you know,
this
obviously
year's
we're
or from
driving
next year's
that.
budget?
What's that?
So this year was what,
450,
450?
and we budgeted 310,
450 to end the year.
and we budgeted
And,
310.
Right, and we're looking at, right now, I'm looking at some payroll issues with the in-time importing. I don't want to speak to it too much until I actually have the numbers. That may have, some things may have shown up as overtime that weren't actually overtime. They should have come out.
Just in this last payroll.
Just in the last payroll?
Yeah.
All right, so,
Well, Rich was saying in the last 2 weeks, fire department overtime was 36,000.
right. there
Right, and
was-
that has to be qualified because it was 1,073 hours, but 476 hours for fire holiday.
Or it's actually a
Somehow
holiday
that dumped
pay.
into the
Holiday
same
that
pack.
got dumped into
It got
overtime.
dumped into overtime, so that wasn't an accurate number.
So call it 16,000?
Right, that's-
18,000?
Right, that was a high number.
But it's
But we
still a
also-
big number.
Right, we had the Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, got guys out, unforeseen, like I said, unforeseen injuries, so, it was tough.
So anyway, on the board right there, you see 309,161 is what we have budgeted, so what do you think is a good level for next year? Since this year is about 450, and that would be the adjusted number, because I think it was 426 in the schedule I did yesterday. Love to
Right.
call it up, add another 18,000 for, you know, half of the last 2 weeks, less 2
Yeah,
days.
I don't wanna make it too, trying to do it on the fly right now, trying to do that number. I don't wanna make it too low, but at the same time, I don't think it'll be 450 next year. That's not
What's your best guess? 400?
400. 400, I'd like to come in lower than that, you know, a lot lower,
Good.
but 400 would be safe.
So that would add 100 more to where we are roughly. Want me to put that in?
I think it'd be prudent to see if we can get that down 50,000 more compared to this year.
Right.
But make it 400 for this year, or excuse me, the budget for next year.
And how about police, same discussion with that?
Chief Ritter?
Scott, you don't want to answer for him?
I was trying to look back in my email. I had sent Chairman Marks an estimate that I had. I don't recall off the top of my head. It was 315,000, I believe, but I could be wrong as the estimate based on all the factors that went into why our overtime budget was exceeded this year.
Am I reviewing those factors?
They fall into these major categories: manpower shortages, which is a couple of different segments of that, and that's based on reduced staffing levels that previously we could absorb manpower shortages without having to have overtime. But with reduced staffing levels, it gets to a point where we need to fill those places. That's not always the case, but the cases where it impacts overtime, those are the cases.
Well, the additional hires toward the end of the year should help alleviate some of that.
Not to the extent that you would see a significant difference. They do in a small capacity, but you're talking about for people who are in training and can occupy standalone really one position, that's the dispatcher position. But if we have a dispatcher that is working, it would make no sense to have them there. So in some cases, yes, they can offset certain manpower shortages, but it's very limited. There is one shift that we don't have a dispatcher where they could, in a lot of cases, do that. But the way that we operate our field training system, it has to be, they have to be in different places. We can't just plug them in there so they don't get the field training because they're occupying this one spot, because that sets them back further.
Thank you.
Manpower shortages, one of the larger categories is special investigations. So that falls into the major crimes investigations and the narcotics investigations. And those with reduced amount of detectives, it really spreads the biggest investigations that we have that are foreseen and unforeseen. It spreads them very thin. So it requires a lot of time to conduct those investigations. Obviously, if you're conducting an investigation for a serious felony, a lot of the preparation is preparing for the prosecution. It's not just arresting the person and shifting it off. Is that you have to do a lot of investigation with regard to collecting evidence, and that's a lot of times forensic. So electronic evidence, making sure that the evidence is stored correctly so there isn't a technicality down the road that causes this felony investigation to deteriorate. So those are the two major categories. It's the manpower shortages and the special investigations, and they're very manpower intensive.
I know Chief yesterday spoke briefly about, and I mean, you answered my question, but just to share with the rest of the council about why the potential to have a nighttime detective or two on is not.
Right.
Sure.
Shift.
So
What's the question exactly?
Well, I
If you'd like to
asked
ask the
Chief
question
Levi
now.
if, Chief Ritter, if we have specifically nighttime detectives. That
So they're not overtime?
they're not overtime, that they would, and he said that based upon the way that they, well, you can answer.
So sure, I mean, the question would be seeing if there is a potential for overtime savings by having a staff person in the detective division outside of the 8 to 4 hours. It's a reasonable question.
I thought it would be hard to do because they have to like communicate with the district attorney's office and stuff like that.
So I mean, there are some limitations, but what we have found over the course of a long time, this goes back a long time, is that the amount of investigations because of business hours, but the intake of the felony major crimes investigations requiring a detective to be there to intake it at that time, it didn't warrant having a person staff, where previous administrations implemented an on-call system where the compensation was very different, and it alleviated the need to have a staff person there, just so there would be, in the case of that coming in outside of that 8 to 4 window, you could have somebody there to take it. So in a lot of cases, it's triaged where if it is a serious enough investigation, we call in a detective outside those hours, and they use a rotational basis to assign a detective to be on call outside of the normal detective bureau hours. They have to be within a certain distance, able to respond. It's inconvenient to their lifestyle, but it is how the system has worked. So you don't have a person there just staffed for the off chance that it might happen, and they can get the work done that is done during normal business hours where they would need to communicate with the district attorney's office and all the other agencies.
Are they paid while they're on call?
So they're not paid while they're on call during the weekdays. They do receive a small compensation of accumulated time when they have their weekend on call.
You said that was prior administrations, that's not being done right now.
This is what over a long period of time was found to be the best compromise to not having a person there just to be there in case, and the equitable distribution of the overtime, if that makes any sense.
But you're not currently using that on-call system?
No, that's what
That's what you're currently
yes, and we
doing?
found that
Okay.
to work very, very well.
Okay.
For
But it does accumulate over time.
It does,
Yeah.
because those are the unforeseen major crimes investigations. I spoke to the one on Christmas Eve where, you know, you have a very, very serious home invasion robbery, and people are on vacation, and there is one detective that is there during normal business hours, but that's because someone drew the short straw and you had to be there on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day to make sure that there is a person during normal business hours to accept those. But it requires that people come in. It's a serious investigation.
Well, it sounds like a serious investigation.
So sure, so I mean, these are the unforeseen things that happen quite frequently, and more frequently than, you know, people would understand.
How many detectives do you have on staff currently?
Off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to recite that number.
I think it's 7. I'll look it up for you right now.
My gut is telling me 9, but
It used to be 9. I think we're
maybe that's wrong.
And they all work day shift?
There are some, the narcotics detectives works, they work in offset hours, which I'm not going to, they work different hours.
Okay. I guess what I'm leading up to is the question, do you think additional staff would equal less overtime?
That's hard to say without some facts and figures,
So
honestly.
much so that it would justify the additional staff? That would be the question. But you say you don't know at this point, which is a perfectly good answer if you don't know.
I just don't know.
Is the majority of the overtime being consumed by the detective bureau?
I wouldn't say the majority, a healthy amount for sure, because they don't experience the manpower shortages are largely in the patrol division. Way more people, but you know, more frequency of manpower shortages. The detective division handles the bulk of the major crimes investigations, all of them actually, and the narcotics investigations. So it's somewhat even in that regard between those two big categories, but there are other categories, obviously. Another one that is something that we can't not do is necessary training. We try to utilize other ways of accommodating shift schedules for necessary training, but that isn't always practical, just because when you have to take someone from night shift to day shift, there are really some times that there's no other way around it. And if it's necessary training, to not give that training is to shortcut the department, and it assumes liabilities that we just are not going to do. So I would say that's a very smaller category, but one of the ones that is really not able to be worked around.
Let's talk about the manpower then. On the patrol division, is there any ability to lower patrols? We've had someone in the council not too long ago come and someone from the public come and complain that the presence of police officers downtown is overabundant. I've had actually a couple people say that the police presence in the downtown district is a little overbearing.
I would love to engage this person in conversation and understand how that actually is. I'm not familiar with that that police state as that person required. The police state that person referred to. I'm not familiar with that.
Police state, huh?
Yes.
Is that really the term? Huh.
Somebody said that one night here at the council.
Yeah,
Yes.
we've had a couple people to come to the
Sure.
council and, because it was in connection with the complaints about, we got a few complaints on the community outposts. Right?
Sure.
And, but the common
Oh, I
refrain was,
remember that person.
we already have a too over-policed downtown. We had one gentleman talk about, like, if you're leaving one of the restaurants, you have to pass 3 police cars before you leave downtown. I'm not saying that, but is there a possibility of lowering patrols? And it doesn't even have to be downtown to solve the manpower issue.
Reducing the number patrolling during the day and night, you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I'll respond to this directly. Any reduction in police forces at this point would be catastrophic.
Really?
Yes.
So I guess the point that the guy was making is if you have to pass 3 police cars, let's assume with that, would lowering it to 2 would be catastrophic.
Any reduction in police forces would be catastrophic. I would imagine that this person was referring to a period in time where in the evening hours of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, there is a nightlife that I'm sure you all are familiar with downtown that requires increased police patrol for safety reasons. So it's not as if these police officers are just arbitrarily sitting waiting for this person in particular to leave a bar. It's that there are an awful lot of people that warrant that for public safety reasons. So I can't speak for why this person feels this way, but any reduction in police forces would be very detrimental.
Do you assemble statistics about incidents of crime and how the patrols service and manage, protect the public? I mean, do you have those kind of like statistically laid out?
Solid statistics, it's hard to actually provide those statistics, but an overview in sense is that the investigations and the serious investigations increase. They just keep increasing.
Okay.
And this is driven a lot
And you can see the movement of those figures upward over time.
in the amount of arrests that we have that are
Yeah.
felonies.
Right.
And the amount of arrests that we have that are drug sales related.
Right.
That those are the reasons why, to remove a patrol division doesn't, they are the first responders to the person that overdoses. That's how they start to understand, okay, this person bought drugs somewhere, so we found them dead or in a state of, close to dying. Those police officers respond immediately. But the information that they obtain could further a narcotics investigation or a major crimes investigation where someone sold something to them that resulted in their death. So you can't have one without the other.
So let's go back to the question that Mike broached about the possibility of increasing staff to offset the expenditure of overtime. Now, I know that there's a lot more involved in salary than just salary. There's benefits and so forth. But have you done any kind of analysis about what your needs are in terms of staffing to maintain and increase public safety in the city of Plattsburgh so that you don't require as much overtime? I mean, you see that as an argument that you would put forward?
So I'm going to take a part of what you said.
Okay.
I don't know if this would be directly related to the offset of overtime. So I'll answer it 2 ways. The selfish part of me would say, yes, we need more people. And it's because you get a better product, you get more safety.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to have an informed response to how that would actually be. And I just don't have that because
You can't pull that out of a hat.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
You
mean,
need to
but
do some
selfishly,
research.
obviously, I'm going to
It's
say
your gut instinct.
But I think what you're hearing here is that this council is interested in data. And we want to see statistics and we want to see facts to help us make decisions.
absolutely.
So if you could help us with that going forward, it'd be much appreciated.
I just have one question too, Chief, and it's somewhat related to Patrick's comment and what we've heard from a number of people that have appeared before us regarding the number of cars that they have, patrol cars that they have. Rather than decreasing, say, the number of patrol cars per se, would there be any advantage to maybe one of those cars maybe being somewhere stationary and then doing kind of a foot patrol through some of the downtown area and the inner city? Would that Because I just say that because
Hearing that
I've
it's
had
a
some
cost.
people raise that question to me.
I have also, that's something I
But I
hear
mean, is
quite
this,
often.
how does this relate to the budget?
Well, I'm just saying, in response to the people that have come to us and said, oh my God, we've had all these cars that we have to go buy, these patrol cars, that, you know, I'm not saying just leave them out there without a car. Maybe, you know, have a car parked on William Street or something where, and then
So are you
you
talking
could have a
about
foot
reducing the
patrol.
fleet?
What's
I
that?
don't understand. Are you talking about reducing the fleet?
No, not at
Oh,
all. I'm
okay.
saying keeping it the same, but, you know, maybe having a car parked on a side street,
Getcha.
William Street or Couch Street or something, and then having a foot patrol throughout the area that,
I have a very easy response to
Okay,
that.
no, that-
You take New York City, for example, where there's a, they call it a fixer, a standing alone foot post, where an officer is on the corner and that's their block. That's, you know, you could also have a foot patrol where that person moves around, and that's what you're referring to.
and a more neighborhood patrol.
A neighborhood patrol. Okay, so if you can find that one zone officer that would have, to use that zone, by patrol car, they would service essentially all of the city west of Beacon Street. So they could respond and do respond quite frequently to a lot of areas in there. But what you've done is now taken that and put that person on a 2-block area where they can only respond on foot. And that's just not the allocation of resources that we can't accommodate that. You would need more officers to accommodate that and still deliver the response that's necessary based on our day shift patrol activities. So that's a great police tactic and a great community resource, but to pluck it out of a patrol day shift, you would be limiting the amount of police response that we would be able to with a car. And those numbers reflect the daily numbers that we respond to calls for service.
I don't think I was really necessarily speaking specifically about day. I think I was looking more towards evening and perhaps when college is in session and so on.
But I think he's saying that would have the opposite
Opposite
effect on the
effect.
budget that you're talking about, because it takes more.
That's
police officers
exactly
to-
what I'm saying. Because if you're referring to the times of the year when there is more foot patrol, more foot activity based on students that are out, we've had periods of time in our department where we've had 12 people on overtime each night. So you could have that foot presence in those areas in a lot of different ways, because that one person arrests a person for having an open container. Okay, if you just have that one person, well then everybody is just going to come through, and there are still going to be people calling saying, they're screaming at the top of their lungs, they're trashing this person's window, they're ripping up, you know, just taking one person, it requires a lot of people still.
Okay, thank you.
Are people getting arrested for open containers? Wouldn't that just be an appearance ticket?
That's what I mean. Arrest in the sense of it occupies an officer's time
Okay.
for 30, 45 minutes, where they wouldn't be able to take police action for the next person that comes through.
Now, Chief, when you talk about the major crimes and the serious felonies, what percentage of those are violent crimes as opposed to just regular narcotics investigation?
Gotta stay with
I'm not
the
sure.
budget, Mike.
I wouldn't be able to answer that without consulting a lot.
I have an additional question. The new substation downtown, is that affecting your staffing at all? Or?
To be honest, a little bit, but it was a necessary component to really give the police service that we are trying to provide, especially in downtown Plattsburgh. But yeah, I mean, you're basically robbing from another place. One person I felt was it was still reasonable. I don't know if I would go further than that. That just, it's me asking somebody to do more with less, and in an already, stressed environment. But I felt that what that officer would actually be able to provide to the downtown Plattsburgh area was more beneficial than the downsides of not doing it.
Okay. Because this is an experimental program and is being funded by asset seizure, can the salaries of the officers be paid by asset seizure when they're working in that environment?
They can't.
Can't. Okay. That's what I thought you were going to say. That would
Had to
have
ask
been too
it.
good to be true.
Had to ask it.
I'd like to follow
If
up on
it were
that too,
true.
but with the community outreach center, is that what we call it? I don't know.
I get what you're saying.
The annex.
You know where he is.
The thing I liked the most about it when you were pitching it to us, and this may be too early to tell, but it was increased in efficiency and maybe decreased in the long run overtime costs, because if someone makes a complaint, they don't have to go all the way down to Pine Street to do it. They can pop right over there.
You're
fill out a
absolutely
supporting
right.
deposition.
That is one of the things that I was hopeful of.
And do you have any sort of assessment, even though it's been such a short time, if it is increasing the efficiency?
It's too soon to
soon to tell.
really tell.
That's fair.
Are there any plans to potentially open it on Friday or Saturday nights to maybe kind of help with some of the downtown commotion, if you will?
That would require
Staffing.
What are the current hours of operation?
8 to 4, Monday through Friday.
But if someone takes a supporting deposition at 2 a.m. from someone at Bono's because they saw a robbery take place there and stuff,
Sure.
they take them to the annex and fill that out, or is it?
If it's more efficient to do that way, yes.
Okay.
So all your officers have keys to that location? They can
There's
come and
a
go.
pool key that they can use
Mhm.
to open it.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay. That's
I
good to
have
know.
one final question since we got you on the hot seat
No
here.
problem.
And has nothing to do with budget, but last night I was downtown on Margaret Street and 3 patrol cars go by with their sirens blaring, and it looked pretty serious. And I can hear in the back of my head a constituent saying, well, how come there were 3 of them? How come 1 couldn't do it or 2 couldn't do it? What would be your answer to that question?
We respond to emergencies and assess the emergency. And if there is not a reason for 3 officers, then at that point, a determination is made.
Maybe one person would back off.
Absolutely, but to just say, oh, this isn't a serious enough emergency, we're only gonna send this person. We just.
You don't know until you get there.
You don't know until you get there, so
Okay.
that would be my best
Makes
answer.
sense. Okay. I'm gonna keep that in mind the next time somebody asks me that
Absolutely,
question.
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Chief, are there any strategies that you've identified? And I know that's the same with Chief Lawless too, because obviously overtime is an issue in
Certainly.
the fire department. Are there any strategies that you have considered or that you're thinking about implementing to limit the amount of overtime?
So in the areas where we can, we're very stringent on how we actually offer overtime. And that is in cases where it's discretionary training, discretionary public events, discretionary anything. The places where we cannot are the places where I talked about, the manpower shortages, the major crimes and narcotics investigations.
So the narcotics investigations, sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt you.
go ahead.
I mean, on your example with the home invasion on Christmas Eve, that's something that's like absolutely things need to be dropped. Investigate that. A narcotics investigation, I mean, any sort of narcotics sale is going to be a felony under the New York penal law, and most of them will probably be B felonies.
Yep,
under criminal.
that's largely what we found.
Yeah, but those aren't as urgent, I would say, normal. Well, depends on the situation, right? If you're talking about a guy who got arrested for possession, maybe, and he tells you who his dealer is, then, you know, that's a little bit more urgent. But if you're talking about a guy who got arrested for possession, maybe, and he tells you who his dealer is, then, you know, that's a little bit more urgent. But certainly like things like that are not time sensitive to some as the degree of the other example of a violent home invasion.
So are you suggesting that processing could be deferred to another time and not required?
I guess so. I don't want to micromanage
Well,
or
so-
because I'm not a police officer.
So
but-
I'll give you a very simplistic answer. 8 o'clock tonight, you're getting down to eat dinner with your family, and your phone rings, and it's your confidential informant that says, I can buy drugs from this person right now. Do you go, no, I don't want to conduct a criminal investigation right now, because I'm sitting down ready to eat. It's not between my work hours, so it can wait until next time. Well, if that next time comes
you
and that person
reschedule your
says,
buy?
exactly, you can't do that. So there are some times where you can depend on a somewhat scheduled investigation. But I would say there's a very large amount of times that it's dependent on a person who is embedded in the drug world that is trying to do something to better themselves, and they can provide information to us, and it is, drug dealers do not have 8 to 4 hours, unfortunately. So we're dependent on the timeliness of a person that's willing to help.
Chief, a couple weeks ago, I asked Mr. Brody the same question I'm about to ask you. Do you have an estimate in regard to how much overtime is spent during special events, the Mayor's Cup, the 4th of July, Battle of Plattsburgh, etc.?
My estimation would be a lot smaller than you think.
Okay,
A lot smaller.
great.
An actual number I wouldn't know, but it is far less.
Under 5,000?
More than that. I would say under
Under 10?
$20,000.
10? I'm sorry.
Under $20,000.
Under
I
20?
think is what just for that event. And I think when you stack it against the Mayor's Cup 4th of July, I think all told it's less than that.
Less than 20?
I believe so.
Okay.
In this, the scheme of, $200,000, $300,000.
Right. 10%.
It's a very small number.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Next witness? No.
Okay,
Conclusions on all that?
I don't think that changed numbers any, but it was a good discussion.
$1,000 worth of,
So while you guys were talking,
okay.
based on what both chiefs said, I updated the overtime to $319,725 for the police, because the chief had $73.15. I do remember that email.
Okay, I was right.
And I added the 1.5% to that. And then on fire, we said 40,000. I think is what, or 400,000 is what we're gonna add, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Not add, but total.
Or half for a total.
Don't scare me, Richard.
Yeah, so that should be 406,000 if we're gonna add, oh no, sorry. No. If he's estimating 400,000 based on today's numbers, you have to add 12.42% to that, which brings us up to 449,680. That was we do this year, 150,000.
Why are we adding 12%?
Because that's what their pay's going up next year, 2019, with the current raises and the anticipated 2% for 2012 and 13.
I mean, so far all we've done is
Increase.
well, we've increased, but I mean, we're doing accounting, essentially, and I do think that our budget should accurately reflect what we actually think the costs are gonna be.
Absolutely.
But we came here, and our goal here is to get our budget under control, and cuts, and I'm wondering how we're gonna get to that.
Well,
Well, I mentioned to Mike, I think one of the things, at least I would like to look at, is our projected revenue for the 2019 budget. where there are large discrepancies between what was budgeted or projected in 28, or for 2018 and what the actual numbers came in at. And I
You
think,
mean increases in
yeah, I
revenue?
mean, if, you know, if we projected in 2018, say, $250,000 of generated revenue from a department or whatever, and it came in at 185,000. Now we're dealing with a $65,000 shortage right off the bat.
And you're talking about like the base before we start cutting, we should match the actual budget maybe to the transfers if it, or talk
Correct.
about them and see if
Correct.
that's a better number.
Exactly.
Which I think is right, but then we have to get down to,
The nitty gritty.
yeah.
Plus, when this budget was prepared back in August, at the end of August, we were anticipating a tax increase of 1.99%.
And that's what's still in these numbers.
And that is still in these numbers?
That's still in those numbers?
Very-
Basically, I'm trying to give you a base to start from.
Yeah.
Okay, based on all the anticipated costs that have come into mind since we did the mayor's budget in August. So that's the point of doing all this accounting,
Yeah.
to get a base. Okay, I added 271,000 back into the contingency for the items the mayor listed off. 200,000 for the police retro, I think 25,000 for Ask Me retro, 26,000 for additional interest on the fire, and 20,000 for 207A. Okay, so if we're gonna accept what I put in for police overtime, which the chief just discussed, and the other chief also said should be 400,000, but I don't know if he's anticipating the raises on top of that. We now have a base to start from, compared to the mayor's budget of $422,000 surplus with the same tax increase of 1.99%. So now we say, do we accept this? We stop? Where do we go from here? We want to start looking at every line item? We can go up and do that.
Now, as a base to start from, were there any other transfers of I don't have the document that you were showing yesterday in front of me, that were big enough that you think we should address here before we really, to get to that base to start?
The transfer to the rec complex has been increased to 575,000. You can see back in 2017, it was 570. This report we're looking at is at different budget levels. I'll show you the actuals, where we are right now.
And that represents a 1% increase in assessment? Or as far as,
Property tax basics,
Property
I
tax.
think that's what, 0.54%?
So here's the same number we're looking at, 575. Here's where we were in 2017, 570. This is what was budgeted in 18, which was way below where it should have been. And that to bring it up to 487,919 to close the year, another $226,000.
So actually, rec came in lower than it was budgeted for in 2017?
No,
Better
No.
off than it?
higher.
higher.
Okay.
Because we had originally budgeted the 261, correct, Richard?
In
To-
2017, we had budgeted 426. We had to supplement the end of the year with 145,000 of additional funding to get rid of a 5-year deficit. In 18, 262,000 was budgeted, but it was absolutely way too low to begin with.
No, but the 487 is less than 570 by quite a bit. Okay, so that's
Yeah,
Okay.
progress.
Richard, may I just ask?
but look what's being budgeted for next year.
Yeah.
Now, you can
And
call it
One
their
comment on
budget.
that 575 for 2019, that includes $77,000 in extra payroll and benefits costs because we moved 2 people who had previously been under DPW to the rec
Yep,
payroll.
right. But it still has to be transferred from the general fund to be able to afford it in the rec complex.
I understand.
So, yep, 77 more here, but 77 less over in the general fund.
Are there
I
any
think
other
one of the
transfers
things
that we
that-
need, or any other transfers that had to occur that you think we should address here before really starting, or are we there yet?
For next year?
Patrick, I didn't hear your question at all.
He asked if there was any, oh, go ahead. Let me speak for you.
Basically, what we're doing is to get to the base point of what actual matching the numbers with what the reality was. And I'm asking, based on those transfers that we approved yesterday, are there any other big adjustments?
Large
that we need to make
adjustments.
before we get to the base point to start discussions?
Well, the other big adjustments that we had talked about yesterday, which was a big impact on 18, was the additional, judgments and claims cost. I added $175,000 to that to increase the accrued liability for the fire award for 2012 and 13. Once again, $118,000 for additional pay for the 2018 retro that's going to be due, because I'm updating this from 2017's ending accrued liability to 2018's ending accrued liability. And $57,000 was also added in there for the total 175 increase for the interest that's due at 9% for the whole year.
2017, that was 806,000. What's the big difference there?
The fire
Fireman.
retro for the 2012 and 2013 2% compounded raises was $777,000 for pay and interest. $37,000 was the interest from May 11th to the end of the year, and it was $750,000 roughly for the payroll and the 207A accumulated cost. There was some additional awards in there for property tax settlements to make it the 806, but the lion's share of that was $77,700 for the fire. Now you can see I've added 175 in on top of the 40,000 in awards and settlements for property taxes this year to increase that accrued liability. So we've recognized the total cost of about $950,000 for that old settlement that's still in appeal status right now. So that was a big pop to the 2018 budget. Whether that's going to be the actual that comes out is another question. We're accruing the worst case. Okay. So that was a big pop, and the $226,000 additional transfer to the rec complex was a big pop. And of course, when you look at the fire payroll, $2,389,000 versus $2,301. I mean, that's a big pop for the pay for their retro. $435,000 is included here. So anything we had saved under budget for vacancies in the fire department, we definitely exceeded that, as well as exceeding the whole budget. And I think the accumulated difference in the fire department's budget versus actual is $459,000 in 2018.
We know that the rec complex, the transfers for 2018 were because of probably overinflated revenue projections that arose in 2017. Are you all very comfortable with your revenue projections that we're including now?
I requested that the rec leaders take a look at the revenue projections that they put in for 2019, based on the fact that those estimates were put in July or August, I believe, and with the additional 5 months of additional financial info, they have made some adjustments. They amount to a total reduction in expected revenue for 2019 for the rec complex as a whole. Originally, we had.
Do we know what, I'm sorry, Matt, sorry, do we know what page that is on the budget?
I'm just going to bring it up right now.
Okay.
The budget level comparisons versus the actual as well.
Yeah, because soccer was down and memberships were down from the actual.
For the mayor's.
And some of the soccer revenue for this year isn't getting paid until January, which happens because of overlap.
Sure.
There's some accrued revenue I have to pull in yet from credit card sales and to do year-end adjustments.
Yes, was CSI for December completed?
Not yet.
Okay, so that will be a big showing for soccer too.
Yep.
You said that's what, 20 grand in revenue?
Probably 25 plus.
25.
I just got a check for 15,000 this week, so.
Well, if we get it this week, it applies to what, 2019 soccer?
Yeah.
So that'll be in 2019's numbers. All right, so But anything we received, you know, payments for in December, we're gonna count as 2018 revenue, and that has to be put in this easy unallocated, which has already got October's in there, I think in November's, there's an adjustment I have to make to that, and we also have that in December, so that's gonna add some additional revenue. But
Okay.
here's the 2017 actual numbers and the 2018 actual numbers for the revenue. Still about the same as what we discussed before, about a $69,000 shortfall from the 17 revenue.
Well, if the CFI for December hasn't been completed, that's an extra 25 that would count for 2018, right?
Yep.
Okay,
So
so
call
it's
it 526 then.
closer to 50.
Yep. Good.
Have you calculated your maintenance and repairs to the crate roof and all of that into
Yeah, that was
these
all included in the
protections? Projections?
Projections for
Mhm.
2019.
So on the whole, though, if you just look at it generally, what we expend to maintain and repair the crate versus the revenue we generate from the leagues and so forth, what are we looking at? I mean, and how does that, I mean, Richard can help with this, how does that trend over, let's say, the last 5, even 10 years? I'm just trying to get at how viable
No,
that
I
operation
understand what you're
is.
saying. I don't have figures from before 2017 in front of me, and the way that the budget is set up is not done by facility. Now, we could certainly have discussion and try and put together a by facility budget to see what those
See,
figures are.
Matt, I'm sorry to interrupt. I would really be interested in seeing that because I'm wondering, and I'm sure that there's some sort of tracking that is done as far as usage tracking over in the rec complex on the Oval, as far as who's using it, what time, peak hours, and so on. I'd be interested in seeing that because then I'm wondering if perhaps would there be some savings by restricting hours or what have you, that we may be able to
It's quite possible.
afford some savings if we tracked it by individual structure facilities.
We do have the costs for the Crate Center.
Yeah, I should amend that
And
for
the
your
gym.
statement. The expenses,
And
Actually,
unless,
no, not
unless
even really
something's being
expense,
charged
because-
to other accounts that I'm not aware of, these should be the costs for those facilities. Now, if the payroll isn't being allocated.
payroll doesn't get allocated because that all got amalgamated under rec complex admin for 2019. So that's gonna be split depending on who's spending time where.
So are you gonna have us allocate that, or are you gonna have us just
Uh,
dump it in one place?
Well, right now, it's all listed
all right
under
here.
rec complex admin. Every full-time employee with the rec complex, their payroll costs are listed under rec complex admin regularly.
Right, that's what's budgeted for 19 right there, 312,470.
Yep.
So then what's budgeted for the Crate Center for costs is just a little bit of overtime pay, some temporary pay.
Mhm. Temporary pays mostly the
Officials?
referees and
And
officials.
this would be the total for the Crate Center costs as
Yep.
anticipated for all the expenses, compared to the actual right now, 169,30, 160,930. So it looks like the temporary pay's gone up.
So essentially officials at soccer are being paid $71,000?
Justin, what else is covered under the temp pay for Crate?
The desk help, coaches.
That's only.
Coaches for,
See,
oh, the city, okay.
That's only 37,788.
no, that's each.
Yeah, beach is 71,580. We're talking about the Crate down.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong line, I apologize.
So if you're looking at the progression of the 2017, the actual figure was 26,000, we're looking at 37, but there's been a significant expansion in the number of programs that the city hosts at the Crate, necessitating the extra temp payroll cost.
There's also an increase, minimum wage going up.
And just out of curiosity, you know, because what kinds of leagues are they and who participates? It's region-wide, correct?
Yes, it
We're
is.
basically making the Crate Center available to county leagues. I just like to make that point, you know, I mean, if
No,
we're,
it's certainly a community, regional asset that the
Mhm.
city bears the entirety of the cost for.
exactly.
Yeah. And I'm certainly in favor of discussions with neighboring municipalities or the county to see if anybody would be willing to have any type of cost sharing agreement. That might be a long shot, but
Sounds like an extreme long shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was
I'm just
discussed-
wondering if there's any sort of policy or procedure that could be incorporated that with residency, as far as teams
Well,
or
yeah, like-
players, if you are a legal resident,
so.
you know, if you have a team that is comprised of all member
Yeah, the
citizens,
same principle as the beach pass. If you're a citizen,
Exactly.
you get it for free.
right?
Yeah.
If you're in-
Well, I'm not saying free, but
Or.
a reduced
Different cost structure.
fee,
Right now, if you're an
various fee
individual for
structure.
flag football or indoor soccer, it's a different fee as opposed to non-city. However, full teams that put in the team, it's all the
Right.
same rate curve. So that could be something that can be looked at.
Does each league generate more revenue than the expense of it?
So
You gotta
overall,
speak up,
revenue
Patrick.
versus expense,
Yeah.
it's
200, well, 162 versus it's pretty
no
close.
plus. Factor in crate rentals too.
Yeah.
It's almost even.
Justin, how often do you negotiate with officials for fees and so on? Is that an annual negotiation?
We haven't done any difference in fee pay probably 10 years.
So it's been level for 10 years?
Yes.
So the crate revenue items are the 31,000 that's budgeted next year, and the 177 for soccer, and then I think trick or treat on Safety Street as well.
Yes.
Is there anything else, Justin, that goes into that revenue?
No.
So the revenue's 214,500, and the projected cost for the crate
It was 162.
is 200,882.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to surplus by about $13,000.
We projected a little bit lower for a few items. So it's around.
Yeah.
I actually have a question, I'm glad you brought that up, Richard, about trick or treat on Safety Street. I know that local businesses and so on are pay for it, but is that, what are our expense?
We buy.
Compared to what, I mean, do we break even on it, or is there an expense to us?
I think we break even on it. Based on the 6,500 revenue, we usually look at about $4,000 worth of
Yeah,
cost for candy.
I think we actually bought less candy this year than we usually do.
the people
We
were
asked that the vendors bring their own candy along in exchange for a reduced rate. So that saves us some money.
The reason I ask that is I've had a couple of people say to me, why does the city do a trick or treat on Safety Street the weekend, if Halloween is on a Friday and it's done almost a week before Halloween? It just almost seems counterproductive.
Yeah, it's traditionally been the Friday before.
Or the Friday before, so, yeah.
It depends on when it's going to fall.
Right. That,
There was a ton of kids there.
No,
Because I sponsored when I
I'm
gave
just-
out 5,000 pieces of candy.
It's 2 Halloween.
Yeah.
yeah.
Can't beat it.
That, I mean, I think when you say trick or treat on Safety Street, the title, the implication is that, okay, you're gonna trick or treat safely on Halloween. But now you're doing it a week before, and just, or even days before.
There might be some kids who don't trick or treat on Halloween and go there. I have a feeling most are going to Halloween, like he's saying.
Yeah. And somebody said, well, what's that costing the city?
If we're breaking even, or if we're pulling in 6,500 in revenue and only costing about 4,000, that's.
Yeah, no, I mean, if it's a revenue generate,
Yeah, and it's minimal time commitment from city staff, so.
And how many hours does it go for, as far as?
Like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
So what would be the overhead for the crate center for 2.5 hours?
It's not very much.
Yeah.
Not very much. And if you look at the total crate, 200,000 divided by.
4 hours, Mike?
You gotta put the floors down, bring them up.
We don't have the floor down for that.
You run them on the turf?
You're on the turf now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the turf though.
I'm worried, I'm sorry, this is a great discussion, but I'm a little worried at the rate of our progress and wondering how we can expedite our discussions.
So yeah, let's, now we have a base level. What is the budget?
Are we talking about rec complex or general? Which one do you want to work on?
Let's talk about generally right now.
Okay.
So we've done all our
Back over that.
transfers.
This is the total rec complex budget compared to the actual expenses in the 18 budget, and it's good for no
Bless you.
deficit, no surplus. So, and at $575,000 contribution from the general fund, probably has a very good chance of coming in under budget or at budget, because that's a healthy contribution to cover their costs. Their revenues are at 676, much more reasonable than the 753 that was budgeted for 18. I think it was pretty aggressive and not attainable. I think you guys will agree with that.
We do.
So anyway, nothing's changed between the mayor's budget and the
And-
council level.
Richard, can you go back up to where you were there with the anticipated revenue?
Okay.
Can you enlarge it? And I think you said we're anticipating, projecting for 18, for
19.
for 19, I'm sorry.
675.
675. Okay. In 2018, the actual was 500?
And it's going to be about 26,000 more.
More than
because
that?
we have to do the credit card sales that came in, any accrued sales. So we're anticipating that to be 26,000
Okay,
more.
so we're then
Based on-
anticipating an increase in revenue generation of 150,000?
Not 150,000, about 100,000, and that's based on some revised revenue projection for 2019 that were based on the additional 5 months of financial data that we have now to base it on. And that is largely coming from about $44,000 in extra revenue expected from the marina complex. Now that assumes that Wilcox Dock will be online and operational. Give me a second here because I'm looking between two sheets.
So we have that number in right at 144, Matt.
Yeah.
So I think I see where Peter's going. Is shouldn't the budget item be, or for the revenue projected, be 626,559?
Right.
No, that's what I'm saying. It should be 626. So if we're looking at a total expected revenue for 2018 of 526, we're looking about a projected increase of $100,000 next year in net revenue.
But I think it, up there is 676, right?
No, I know, but that hasn't been changed because this was just recently completed. I asked the rec leaders to, again, take a look at the revenue projections they submitted back in summer based on the actual results from this year, if they wanted to make any changes, and they came back with about $56,000 less in expected revenue.
Okay, so which line items are you changing? I know we're getting into the accounting, but this is the way we get this.
No, I know. All right, so crate rent, 2035.
Yep.
It's going from 31 to 27.
Okay.
Gym membership, 2045. Going down to 150, 087.
150,087 from 162,686, okay?
Yep. Guys, let me know if I'm spoiling anything here. Gym rent, 2046. That's actually being raised from 41 to 46,026.
Okay.
2067.
Run camp?
Well, actually, to allow for a more intuitive way to track these things, we changed the names of a couple of the line items, but they haven't been changed there yet, so.
We haven't had a chance to do that.
Yeah, when we say 2067, it's not run camp, the heading we have is gym fitness programs. That is being taken down to
Like
zero.
Biggest Loser and things like that? or-
Yeah, but Ted, where was that moved to?
That was moved right into the gym membership stuff too. So I essentially took the gym memberships, we used to charge more for the programs, and I integrated them right into a gym membership so you get more membership. I think it would be a better move. People are gonna get more membership.
And are
So
memberships
those
tracking
67's
down?
going to zero?
As far as-
Down. No, I imagine they're gonna go up just now, so I'm hoping that next year, we should have a little bit more in the revenue that way.
There was also the loss of the powerhouse, so.
Yes,
Right.
we got one less gym.
Yeah, and I see the Y is being aggressively
Yeah.
marketing
Yeah,
themselves.
we're gonna probably have to start marketing, we have a marketing budget, so we'll have to start to do that as well. And let me know we have gym, so.
So just so I have it right, 2067 is going to 0,
2067 is going to 0.
2046 going to 46026, 2045 150,087, and 2035 to 27,000.
Yes.
That's it?
No. All right, 2069. No, I'm sorry. I did more.
2036.
Yeah, I'm looking at 2069. Yeah, 2061, I'm sorry. 2061, that's the new name, that's going to be Gym Sports Programs. It's a 3402, that's going to be up to 5902.
Okay.
For 2069, that is brought down to 0.
Okay.
2036, that's sports programs at the crates. That's being brought down from 177 to 162.
Okay.
2039 is going from 6,500 down to 0. And again, a lot of these are just combining different.
So no more trick or treat, huh? For being-
And that is all of the changes.
Okay.
So trick or treating was combined with something or eliminated?
It was combined, although what was it combined with?
Great events.
Great events.
Okay.
Okay.
Counselors, I'd like to recommend that we take a 10-minute break. We've been here for an hour and a half. That'll give us an opportunity to, or for Richard to update all those numbers.
I'll
And
just update what we just went over so we can see, maybe we can finish right complex if this is.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure,
but I
sure, let's do that.
Okay.
make a natural cut point.
I need a bio break.
Go ahead. While you guys are doing that, I'll update the numbers.
We
Go
can
ahead,
finish
Mike.
the red complex.
Go
No,
ahead.
that's all right, I can just, let me just update those, and while you guys are on a break, we can come back and look at it.
Okay, thank you.
I need a stretch break, a back break.
No,
I need coffee.
Too, I think.
I'll ask Richard if anything in the capital plan will hinge on this, but I don't really think so. We can reserve the bonding.
Right. Oh, shoot. Isn't it why all of a sudden the Wi-Fi does not connect in
I
here?
have a terrible time with the Wi-Fi in the city here, not the city hall. so I just use my own cell phone.
Well, I know I should be able to get cell service.
Here's the first time I've seen this explanation. Somebody being removed from the payroll, employee is incarcerated.
So now the budget's not just yes.
What's your system?
I think we're get it. So that'll be more than double the we don't have to raise taxes. Right, I don't know what it is. Well, I'll tell you what happened to me. Hey, Matt. Okay now? Justin, Ted. Yes. Okay, but now what it creates, $55,000 deficit. So we have to increase the transfer, or we're going to change the cost of
Miller, are we increasing the transfer to 630?
we increase the transfer, we're going to cut the cost So we reduce revenue by $55,000. That means we have to change that. No, not put you on the spot. That's the question I got to ask because that has to be.
As it stands now, we would have to
What's the budget?
It would have to be 55,000, 7,004. Bottom line on the right is
Oh, okay.
So 55,794 has to be added to the.
I woke up wrong. Just made last night like a 300 days ago.
You already paid this?
Yeah, I already paid it.
We're streaming. Oh, okay. Did they hear us there?
Yeah. So we're going on with
It wasn't dire straits. They said we're left on everything in 2018. And it's getting done in 2019. So we're great to get the fire department, great to get this one in that crew and everything. So I had to do 19, so I'm done about 19. Well, this is where right now, let me finish that planning here with those. That's all right. No. It's still a surplus. All the other stuff at the station. Yeah. Environment. Both are in 2018. I believe. Divided by 50 guys, that's 30,000. Chris Jackson, I don't know how you guys all know. I remember us in executive session. And I did that. I think I was down and I had 50 guys. I didn't say that. Somebody said, where did you check? I said, well, I've never spent that. The highest got about on average, four guys. Translation. Okay, so back to where we were. Yeah, it always hurts to be I would remember. Well, yeah, that's because 18. Okay, so here's where we are. Yeah. Talking about the Sales tax. Only revenue. However, we don't have the final cost.
That's what I'm about to ask you.
Don't worry.
Can I see that for 1 second? Miller. Matthew. Matt. Can I have one of these?
Not sure if I have any left, but yes.
Find out. If you do, I want one.
Yeah.
What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Proposal.
Oh. Yeah, I like one too, Matt.
Alright, yeah, I might have to print out some fresh copies.
I told Colin about going down to do a observation. Next week probably won't work real well for me because I have a workshop Wednesday, Thursday, and then I'm leaving Friday for Florida, so.
Oh.
What about Tuesday?
Tuesday, they're coming up here.
What about Monday?
Monday, we could do Monday.
I mean, I'll make it clear, I don't care.
I mean, Monday would be the only day I could do it.
No, I think about it on Monday though.
Yeah. The following week would be.
Yeah. Alright.
Right. Yeah, I know. Well, I think
But it would have, we'd have to do it before the 14th,
even it'll take us an hour and a half or more to get there.
before the 10th.
Well, the 10th's next Friday.
Right, so it would have to be Monday.
I guess Monday or no.
Yeah. Or, I mean, I could drive down myself on Monday, or take anybody with me that wanted to go down.
That's right, Elizabeth was looking for the start of it.
Okay, I'd like to reconvene our meeting here. What I'd like to do at this point is to take a look at our revenue versus expenses projections for 2019 so that we can see what we're up against as a whole and see what move we should make after that. I have some thoughts on that, but I'd also like to hear from my fellow councilors on that as well. And
Before we do,
anyone
Richard,
else.
are there any other areas that really, the revenue projections from 18 underperformed?
Actually, can I ask, do you guys plan on discussing rec in any more detail, or are you moving on to?
I think we're pretty much done.
I think, yeah.
Okay, so it's, I can tell
And-
these guys.
Yeah.
Yes, and thank you so
Thank you,
much
guys.
for the detail. We really appreciate that.
Thank you, guys, have a good one.
The closer we are to reality, the better. Thank you very much.
So rec complex is done?
Yes.
Okay. We reduced the revenue by 55,794 roughly from outside sources and increased it for the internal contribution.
So our internal contribution is
Went
not,
up on the general fund.
yeah,
Okay. And that's reflected right here.
631.
Yep. Compared to the 575.
5, all right. Which is what we did this year.
So can we look at the bottom line for the general fund? Again, to see what kind of revenue, what kind of expense, and then what we're left with. And at this point, it looks like we're ahead by $366,000 at the end of 2019. And that is with a 1.99% tax increase.
That's right.
So to me, it seems like the smart thing for the council to do at this point would be to see if we can reduce any expenses along the way to increase that fund balance at the end of the year. I mean, it's a healthy sign that we're able to stay under the tax cap. It speaks to a whole lot of work on a whole lot of people's part over the course of the year to manage revenue and expenses. The thing that the council could do at this point is help to improve that fund balance, I believe. Are there any places where there can be obvious cuts made at this point?
Can I ask you a question before we go there though? Just now that we've got pretty close to a baseline, and we still have to finalize the capital plan, but my understanding is that that wouldn't really impinge upon these calculations because we'd be going out to borrow on that, and that would affect 2020. So I just want to make sure we're all, that's still a good assumption.
Yes.
And I know that there were some roof repairs anticipated for the Trade Center. We still have to figure out whether we're going to take that big leap of doing it completely, and that could be upwards of $600,000 if I recall, but there might be a possibility we get a lot of materials donated from a local manufacturer too, but that's probably something we'll have this looming out there as well. But again, I think my assumption then is that it wouldn't, because of the capital project, it wouldn't impinge upon any of these calculations too. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, then also DPW needs a new draftsperson, and we can find the money. I'd like to give DPW money on what Mike was asking for, is like curbside pickups of large items that people are impermissibly leaving on the side. Right?
Can I add, and I only say this, and it comes as an idea because I was actually able to take advantage of it. It was done at another municipality out of the area. Once a year, they have basically their public works system public works department sets up a station where it's a weekend, it's a Saturday, where anybody can bring electronics, televisions, any paints, any sort of hazardous, where they have basically for one day where the city sponsors it, but you have to show residency. You have to, they go through a point and you have to show at some point that you have residency. So, I mean, someone from the town or Beekman Town or somebody can't come in and dump those.
We tried that once and it got very expensive.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Actually, at $27 a TV set.
That's for small.
That's for a small one.
Mhm.
Then you have water coolers, refrigerators, anything with a compressor that has refrigerant in it, you're paying.
Well, they did charge. They charged, there were fees that if you came in with, like, I believe it was $10 a carload, and then if you had a pickup truck, it was $25, and if you had a trailer and so on.
It's very, very costly, and you've heard us complain before. We had a bad day, I think it was down in the flats actually, where in a 2-block rotation, we found 5 TV sets in no man's land. And,
Oh, no.
So there's, $1.25 that we have out of our pockets.
Remember the 8-item wish list I gave you?
Yeah.
That was one of the items. Because of people leaving all the stuff on the side of the road.
You asked for an
TV sets,
additional
refrigerators, beds,
5.
you name it.
Mhm.
Well, that was also the cheapest one, but that's I think that, what was that, like $11,000?
We just threw it, it was, like a 1200.
In your wish list, the two I thought that was a good one, and the draftsperson seems to be a
An
darn
important
necessity.
The draftsperson and
The lady in the office.
the draftsperson was always the position we had. It was a position we zeroed out, and we had a retirement. And there has to be a certain level of redundancy. Obviously, everyone knows Andrew who's out there. There's a lot of real impressive stuff, but he's actually not getting his mission done, which is a lot of mapping, there's a lot of in-house stuff he's not able to do because he's tied up. I mean, I think he does in excess of 2,000 big safe tickets a year. So he's on call basically 24/7. So it could be New Year's Day. They have him say another utility has an emergency. He has to leave home, go in, and mark all the utilities. He has to respond and check off every one of those 2,000 plus tickets. So that alone is a full-time job.
And I think we had, according to my notes, it was the draftsperson was calculated at 45,000 plus benefits.
Yes, that's the base salary and plus whatever the fringes are. Richard would have that. I don't know, is it 40 or 60?
It's about 40%.
Okay.
We still budgeted.
Looking at
engineering
60,
and
61,000.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
We talked about the tree.
The arborist.
The
trees and you wanted more salt and stuff too.
Well, I think the salt was taken care of.
Yes, it's all taken care of. And we wanted our lady in the office to get a little better job.
Right.
They've
Which,
got skills and responsibilities.
that was 4,500, I believe.
Yeah.
I'd just like to make one comment here. A surplus at the end of the year of 366,000 is not that good.
Not a lot.
And there's,
Right.
every year I can guarantee you that something will come up that we didn't anticipate. So I would be much more comfortable if that number was twice that. Because in reality, we're probably not going to net that at the end of the year.
Well,
So-
let me ask you this, Rich, the projection on 2018 was 851,000.
811, right here.
It's the original budget.
The original budget, 811, 911.
But the actual is a negative of 50.
Right now it's at 53,000 negative, and I only have one revenue source, but we haven't booked yet, 245,000, but we do have some additional expenses to run through. For additional payroll that applies to 2018, as well as the healthcare runout. I went too far, sorry. We're 4,218,000 right now. We budgeted 4,273,000. I think we're going to come in, probably 4,350,000. There's just, we have to run out the rest of this month on it to be consistent with last year. We budgeted 4,470 next year, which I think is a good number, so I don't think we have to deal with that. But we're going to have some more expenses this year that we have to recognize.
But I can definitely see why Jeff brings
Yeah,
this up.
I agree.
When we had budgeted an 851,000. 811 surplus.
Right.
And we end up with a deficit of 52,000. Even, I know that won't be exact.
The
Now-
851 was a very optimistic projection I did. Here was what the original budget was in this column.
But yeah, I can see why, we're looking at a 366,000, but if it ends up anything like this past year, then we'll be looking at a shortfall.
Let me just point out that it was a very good thing we did budget a surplus, because as it turned out, we needed it. So we want to do the same thing again, I think.
But you remember, 2018 has taken some hefty hits.
Yeah.
$435,000 worth of retroactive pay to the fire department. $175,000 of additional accrued liability for 2 years of the fire department's anticipated expense. $226,000 to the rec complex. These things weren't anticipated, weren't budgeted for it to be. It's a big number. That's why it's gone from 811 surplus down to a deficit right now. All the bad news is showing up in 2018.
I should add too that everybody worked really hard to stay under and below budget and to delay replacing positions as long as they could, and to delay expenditures as long as they could too. They've shown an awful lot of diligence in doing this too. So first of all, I really appreciate all that. But second of all, if we think we can just do a lot more of that and come in under budget, I think they're working as hard as they possibly can to really stay under budget as it is.
Well, the cap is 2.54, right?
2.86.
But the mill.
That's right.
2.54.
Yeah, so you do have a little bit of latitude with the mill rate to go up 30, 40 basis points still, and
No, we can actually go up to 2.86 and the levy.
on the levy, but he's
And the
asking.
levy,
about the mill.
levy is what we budget for, not the mill rate. We budget for the levy in these numbers. So it can go up as high as 2.86 before we go over the cap. Doesn't matter what the mill rate works out to because of growth and so forth. What counts is what the levy increase is allowed at 2.86%. And right now, we're at 1.99.
And I
So it's
believe
another
last
100
night we
another
projected.
191,000 we can add to the general fund if we go to the tax cap, which, increases property taxes that much
Right.
more.
Right, and I think last night we calculated that if we went to the cap on a $150,000 assessed valued home, we're looking at $80 increase. Which is actually even more than that when you factor in county, school taxes, and an increase in the escrow balance that would need to be maintained if anyone was still financing their home.
Jeff, you brought up a really good point about you'd like to see double that surplus next year. How would you suggest we achieve that? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, the simplest way to save money is through attrition. You don't want anybody being affected that's already here, and I don't think anybody wants to see that. But I think we have to look at running a little leaner, because, you know, a little bit extra money on insurance, we get some more claims or something, you know, that we have to build up a fund balance, or we're always gonna be sitting here on the edge of our seats. And I don't think, you know, the people out there on the street want us to give them surprises. We get a surprise, and then we're gonna have to surprise the people with the tax increases. And I really would like to see that stable, and I think Peter mentioned that. We need to keep that tax rate down as low as we can. Reasonably, I mean, without cutting anything.
So, I guess it comes down to, where can we find an additional $366,000 in cuts? And that is not, that doesn't even factor in Patrick and the DPW with their needs with the drafts person, and
Remember that a couple things. Number one, that was a wish list.
Yes.
Those weren't demands.
we understand.
We were asked to
Right.
generate, we weren't asked to find money somewhere else, in someone else's budget. That was only a wish list. The other thing we have to remember is those personnel positions are only 1/3 the cost. So, because they're split up between the 3 funds. So the impact on general fund
Would be, so with the drafts person, essentially, the impact would be $20,000 on the general fund.
Yes.
And yeah, I know those are wish list, and those are the 2 items that I would hope we could find.
With the arborist though, didn't we also talk about
The arborist.
possibly going through MLD with, wasn't that?
He had a conversation, we cut the price down, 50 to 25. And we had spoke about dealing with MLD about it.
And again, it's an allowance, you know, it's completely up to you guys. If someone calls and they've got a 150-foot tree that we can't handle, it's starting to come down to pieces, and it's on city property, you're gonna pay regardless. It's just a mechanism. Now, whether we do it as find it, you know, have Richard find the money somewhere for us, because that's what usually happens. If we come to Richard and say, hey, listen, we've got an extra expense and we don't know where, you know, it's not in our budget. It's not an MLD tree that's covered by MLD because of wires. So do we do it this way, or do you want to do it another way? But it still exists. You know, the number of trees we have in the city of Plattsburgh, we probably could quadruple that. It's still not covered by trees, but it was a thought. And again, it was a wish list item. And it's up to the council to decide how we want to address it. Do we want to address it, put something in the budget so we have something there to charge it to, or put nothing in it and find it later?
How much is it right now? 25,000?
We cut to 25,000.
There is 25. Yeah, and the initial wish list request was 50.
Correct.
I think I'd like to see the money increase for the refuse, the additional money for big refuse like you were asking for, because I believe that a very small amount of money there will equal a whole lot of impact for people who live in neighborhoods where these things are happening, like 5 television sets on the street.
Well, we pick them up regardless.
I know.
It's just one of those things that gets lost.
Somebody's got to pay
It goes
for
against a
the.
line item that does not exist.
Somebody's got to pay for the disposal of them.
Yes.
So that's kind of what we were doing before, is trying to have our budget mask reality or match reality a little better.
Could we charge the property owner that has?
Whenever we can, we do.
We can, we do it.
It goes right to Joe, and Joe takes care of it. But people are savvy, you know,
They'll put it in their neighbors.
They'll put it next to the stop sign or their neighbors, yeah.
Or on a street corner.
Street corner. I told the story about I caught someone on a Sunday morning over at Wilcox, pulling a love seat off the back of a pickup truck. And I wheeled back around and he was throwing it back in the pickup truck. He was calling me for it out there.
And the revenue we budgeted for refuse next year is $700,000. There was an increase put through January 1st, 2019, so hopefully that'll increase enough to shore up the difference between our actual from 2018. We're about 30-some thousand off there.
So you're saying we may have the money already to cover the additional cost of.
And we're 36,000 lower than we budgeted from actual results, and hopefully that increase will bring that 36,000 in to keep it at 700,000, because I don't think we have to adjust with that rate increase. Just depends on how many customers quit and move on because of the rate increase.
The other thing I remember that we wanted to talk about at the end of the year, if there was money left, was the cats.
Cats, yeah.
Yeah.
$3,000. Was it 3,000?
I think it was 3,000.
If there was money left in that line item, which I think.
Out
was
of
under the
animal
police
control
budget.
of 19,000.
Taking you there right now.
Chief, how do you feel about that? I think we're going to reassess at the end of the year to see if there be some latitude for that program.
Currently, the fees for services is $24,413.73 against a budget of $23,750. And the contract services are $12,951 against $19,000. So the chief was gonna look at this at the year end and see if, we had that $3,000 available.
And how did it end up?
Just numbers
You're
right
at
there.
13 of 17 spent. So you've still got a $6,000 surplus, looks like.
Yes.
I gotta see if we've gotten the last bill from Jim Burgess.
Yeah, that's, that's.
Yeah, so that's another 2,083, but still, let's say another 2,083 comes in there, you still have about $4,000 surplus. So I don't know which one to do there.
That was what we said we would do if we had the money left over, then we would.
Give the money to the cat.
That's what I said, so
Spay
if we
and
do,
neuter.
then.
Okay. Sounds like we can do that. They'll be happy.
Denise left about 20 minutes too early.
She did.
I'm sure she's happy.
Should be happy to hear that.
Okay, one thing done.
Do it.
So when you look at these numbers, once again, here's the, Councilor Moore's talking about 367,000. Another thing to remember is that we've got all the worst news in that we can for payroll, because everybody's payroll who's in a union is up 1.5%, and so are the benefits related to it. And we just increased.
We just increased fire department overtime by $91,000.
And we also increased police overtime. You get to the budget comparisons here. So, and the payroll increases are budgeted for the fire at 12.42%, including all the raises that they could possibly have for their back years. So I mean, it's, all the worst case hits for one-time payments are in 2018, but the expense base has been increased in 2019.
To cover it.
To cover it.
I hear what you're saying, Richard, but I think I know it's probably not the most popular thing to say, but I think that there needs to be really a renewed emphasis on staying within the parameters of the budget.
And we had $271,000 in as a contingency.
Well,
for retroactive.
But, and I agree with Jeff too. I'm not all that comfortable with the $367,000. I would feel a little more comfortable if it was at least 500,000 or 600,000.
Especially considering we have no fund balance
Right.
to really fall back on.
Exactly.
So we're living paycheck to paycheck, basically.
Right.
yeah.
So it's a matter of saying we're gonna increase revenues somewhere, or we have to cut expenses.
What is our fund balance?
Or
right
a
now?
combination of
Zero fund
both.
No,
balance.
it's 207,000 unassigned at the beginning of 18.
What did we?
budgeted-
What was our legal fees projected at?
Where's Corporation Council? All right, so that's the budget, 285. And here's the actual. 273 against 295.
So we're under budget on legal fees.
A little bit, yeah, 21,000. There's also some legal costs that show up in the fire department's direct costs because they have so many legal costs.
Is that's not applied to the 273?
Nope, it's right on this line item, then .2 right here. 59,191 against the budget of 80,750. We're budgeting 65 for that next year. Those are all the arbitration costs that we anticipate having to go through with the fire department because they're litigious. They're a litigious crew.
I'd like to remind everybody that every month in 2018 that Mr. Marks reported to us in our Finance and Budget Committee meetings that the various departments were able to hold the line, and they did an excellent job of revenue enhancement and expense reduction.
Very good point.
So that contributed to our success in 2018. And I think we can expect the same in 2019. And I would add to that we've already figured in what we think are the worst case scenarios for pay raises and various other expenses. So, we're looking good, but I do not want to count on that solely. I would feel better if we could somehow get that fund balance up, even in the $500,000 range, to be
I agree
more
with you, Mike.
comfortable. So, there are two ways we can do that. One is to cut expenses, and the other one is to increase taxes. So, those are our choices.
If you go to the tax cap, you can raise another 191,000.
We could.
How do you get the 191,000 calculation? Do you go over that with me?
Okay. Where's the mayor's budget we had up? Beth had called that up here, and I don't know if I still have it open.
Mike, you had a question?
Well, we purchased all our salt for 2019, so I don't know if that's still in the budget or not, if you remove that number.
We can take a look at that.
Is that salt and sand or just salt?
Salt.
Sand tends to be a lot less expensive, so.
Here's the analysis right here. This is the tax cap calculation that's required by the state of New York.
So
Here's
we
where we are
could-
right now, and here's what we can go to.
I see.
191,957. Because the levy is allowed to go up 1.086 for tax base growth and 1.02% for allowable growth factor, so 2.86%. You take the 8.6 and the 2. And we just budgeted 2%, which leaves us 191,957. And that would all be general fund. Even though the special assessment district taxes are included in here, they're a wash one year to the next, $85,000. So the 191,957 is the allowable increase, and we can still go to if we have a 2.86% growth rate.
So what would the revenue go to on your chart here?
If we go from 11,602
to, you'd be going to, what was that figure, 11.7 something showed?
100,
Because they calculated out,
197?
didn't you show you what that could go to? It could go to 11,721,696.
No. You go up 191,957.
191,957. Essentially 192.
And 11,602,995.
So it would essentially be
It'd be
11,795, yeah.
So that's a way to add a couple $100,000 almost to this bottom line, so.
So
go from
combining that
66 to
and
56.
the salt pre-purchase gives you almost somewhere around $300,000 that you're looking for.
Yeah,
How much was the salt applied, Richard? Was that still in that
120.
133,000.
133, and that,
130 would be a-
that hasn't been calculated there?
Okay, so let's look at the line item here, snow and salt, right? Or snow and ice, excuse me. We go 189,720 budgeted. As compared to a budget of 168. Our actual in 2017 was 122. You can see that the actual this year is 392 because we ganged up on it.
Right.
We only projected to go, what, $70,000 more, $60,000 more, but we went and got a bunch more. So I don't know if you want to drop this number down. You never know what's going to happen with the weather.
It's already purchased for 2,000.
It's got over 2,000 ton up, so.
And in the fall,
Leave it at 39,000.
in the fall, you're gonna wanna go out and start getting ready for the following spring
Yes.
too. So you don't wanna bring that to zero.
No.
Take
What if you took, what if you took,
You know, the problem is
125 from it?
we purchase as much as we can. We can't purchase any more, otherwise you're gonna end up paying a premium. We're allowed 20% over. So if you were to put it down to 39,000,
We'd have 39,000 next.
yeah, you'd have to cover sand and some winter mix for patching, and that would be some of that line.
So you're saying to take $150,000 off that line item?
For this year, for 2019.
for 19?
But for 2020, you're gonna have to at least have that much back. Because you have to purchase for 2020.
So how about if you just split the difference between the two?
75,000?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's safer.
190 would be what?
We may have salt left over if you don't have a real bad year. you know?
Right.
So,
Takes 95,000 off
right now you
that.
got Mother
Yeah.
Nature to deal with, so,
Yeah.
So you have a big stockpile right now?
yes.
To last you 3 months, January, February, March.
We have over 2,000 ton, which is.
And then
what we
also
here.
1 month in December next year.
Yeah.
What if we left it just at 100?
Yeah. What do you think of that?
That's fine.
That's fine.
Would you actually spend that, you
If
think?
necessary. Again, it's completely dependent on the weather.
You don't know. Okay. I think that's fair,
So if we go to the tax cap, the surplus at the bottom line would be 558,606. And then you say you want to take 75,000 off of the
No, 89.
89,000?
Yeah.
Bring that line to 100,000.
So they gave you 648,000 as a surplus.
What is it if we don't go to the tax cap?
Be 100,000, it'd be 466.
Of course, it's. But that would only have 89.
456,000.
What if we went,
Or is
if
it-
instead of going, what if we, I'd hate to go right up to the cap. What if we went to like 2 1/4?
Split the difference.
Right.
I agree. I think that's an excellent idea. We're still under the cap.
You think 456 wouldn't be enough and keep it at 199, 1.99?
That's another option.
To me, kind of the magic mark is at least a 500,000, $500,000. I don't know why that figure is stuck in my head, but I
Feels
just feel.
comfortable to me too.
Is there anything
Well,
we
I
want
mean,
to cut?
don't you need
Could
to
we-
articulate what kinds of things you're anticipating might happen that we don't want to be left in the lurch?
Well,
But
more
true.
salt and sand would be one example.
Well, yeah, but
Uh,
Bunch
I
of
mean,
trees fall down.
Yeah, I mean, we could have another ice storm or something like that, and where we
Mechanical
have.
failure for us is typically our big cost. Last year, to give you guys an idea, we did one complete engine replacement in one of our frontline heavy garbage trucks, 3 complete overhauls from the bottom end up. So, the engine replacement with turbos, you're looking 24,000, I think, Richard, we had to do a budget transfer, right?
Yep.
So that was 24, and if we would have farmed it out, it probably would have been closer to 50 if we did it in-house. The engine rebuild ran about $13,000 to $14,000 a piece.
I just keep thinking about what my fellow counselor, Mr. McFarland, said. That was, we are one lawsuit away from bankruptcy. So we have to have a fund balance. We have to.
Oh, no, I wasn't arguing whether or not we should have a fund balance. We're all discussing the extent of the fund balance.
What it should be.
Yes.
Did you figure out, Richard, did you figure out a two-quarter?
No, I didn't, yeah. We're
The other
bouncing all
factor
over the
we've been
place.
quite lucky with for quite a while is healthcare costs. But you have one bad inflation year, that inflation goes from, say, 4% to 7 or 8%, which a lot of the other municipalities are facing those kinds of increases. We haven't. And that can take a big chunk out of our budget pretty quickly too. That's our second biggest cost in our budget beyond payroll.
So all I'm saying is, it seems to me that our projections about what might befall us need to inform the level that we're shooting for, not just some kind of
Not
out of
some
the
random
air
thing.
kind of figure. That's all I was asking for.
Well, one thing that we have accrued as of the end of 18 is $952,000 worth of liability related to 2 years worth of fire increases.
Yeah,
The
that's a
likelihood of that-
concrete kind of thing.
Well, it's a concrete number based on 2% for each year.
Yeah.
So one question is there potential for a recovery there if we do better in that appeal? That could be cut in half, which, if it comes in 1% for each year, we pull back 450,000.
Jeff, how do you feel about the 500 level?
I think that's a good compromise. You know, if we stay diligent during the year, I think, yeah, that's probably a good number.
We could even see an increase there.
Right.
And like Richard
It's
said.
a target.
if that
Let's use it
settlement-
as a target.
If that settlement is smaller than we anticipate, then there's another source of funds for us, so.
Okay, so we're saying to take 89,720 off of the materials for snow and ice,
Correct.
and add another 0.25% to the tax levy increase. Right?
Yes, just to see where that brings us.
So that would be it's only over $28,000. Not much.
Does that put us over, well, we're at 366 plus 89. That's 456 plus 25, right? So Richard?
28.
We're getting pretty close to $500,000 here.
Plus 89720 plus 2841.
It's $9,000.
485,000. 484,810.
15,000.
One thing that hasn't been considered, of all the employee groups that are getting raises, there's nothing projected for the managers except for their step increases that are normal. There's no across the board cost of living increase of 1.5% projected for them, which if you do it across the board, all managers, is $339,000 on a 10-year projected basis. So 1 year's 33,000, let's say. General fund impact is only 18,000 on an annual basis. I know it's the only employee group that everybody can say no to, and there's no big deal, but managers have only had 2 pay increases since 2007 to their pay scale. And now everybody has had increases to their pay scales, except for the years where we got zeros for AFSCME and MLD. Now the fire department's got increases for every year, except for 12 and 13, which we know is going to be decided in their favor for something. So they'll have had raises from 2007 all the way through 2020.
Does that 1.5, is that for every manager or only the ones that are stepped out?
It would move the scale up,
Oh,
1.5%.
Okay.
And like I said, it's general fund impact on an annual basis of 18 grand. Across the board, 34,000. Across all funds.
So 33,000 there to bring the surplus down to.
No, 18.
18.
18
Because
general funds.
it's
34
shared.
across all funds, all managers. I think I even had the police and fire in there, which I have to take out because they're getting increases based on the highest paid guy under them. They get that dollar increase, and I've already budgeted those changes for 2019.
Yeah, and in the resolution, they were specifically exempted.
Exactly. So I think that it's even a more favorable impact to the general fund because those raises shouldn't be included. When I did that analysis, I just let everybody in. Because I was really interested to see what a 10-year forecast for all managers and then the general fund at 1.5% every year compared to the fire department increases for 10 years. Fire department's $4 million, general fund's $182,000 for all managers. So it's a pretty insignificant number compared to what we're doing for all the other labor groups.
They're the backbone of the city, by the way.
that's right.
Yeah.
They really are.
And to think that there's
They
only been
helped us toe the
2 pay
line
rate
all year.
changes
Yeah,
since
I,
2007
you're
is
not gonna
kind
get
of-
an argument from me.
So I mean, that's something they could put in there too. Just a thought.
So then let me ask, we're looking at potentially about $30,000 away from the, I'll call it the magical $500,000 figure. Is there anywhere we can find $30,000?
Wow.
Would be nice.
Sales tax I have at 3.2% above the budget. We're actually looking at a 5.1% increase in actual numbers this year. That's what it's been running all year. And so that's what we projected. I don't know if it's worth looking at that and saying add 30,000 to
But that fluctuates, a lot of it fluctuates with, number one, the price of gas, and number two, the Canadian exchange rate.
Okay.
No, but I'm
adding 30,000 to a $4,135,000
figure.
When, like I said, it's running 5.1% increase this year.
Yeah, cat licenses?
I mean, it's something that we could look at. This is a number the county said for us to use, but I don't know if they've updated those numbers since we've been coming in at 5.1% actual over previous year, not budget, previous year.
When do they tell you to use that number?
Back in August.
In August?
Yeah. Now, the 5.1% that I've anticipated here with the accrual is based on this figure and not on our budgeted figure of $4,007,000. If you look at that, it's a 7% increase, our actual numbers. I can't believe that it's not going to stay consistent because it's been a good year for sales tax collections. I've heard nothing but good news from them. Peter, you've told me nothing but good news about that all year.
You're right.
And you said, why don't you increase that, why don't you increase it? So I finally bit the bullet and I've increased it. I'm thinking it's gonna come in good at 5.1% increase over the actual last year. So I mean, you could add 30,000 to that if we think that that's gonna be consistent for future periods.
I mean, I guess, based upon the county's budget that they budgeted, they seem to be thinking that along those lines as well.
Yeah, I didn't see what they forecast for their sales
No, but
tax.
I mean, I don't think they went up at all with an increase.
They usually don't have to.
No.
But but a lot of that is based on sales tax.
Sales tax. And health, I think their biggest issues are sales tax and healthcare. That's where they have the crunch. Their labor costs don't accelerate as fast as the cities, but their healthcare costs too.
I'm comfortable I guess increasing it by 30,000 if everyone else is.
It's just one thought.
I-
Because it's a positive item on the revenue side.
I'm comfortable with that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Jeff thinks so.
Yeah.
So add 32 sales tax. Okay, so we're down 89,720 on contract service for snow and ice. We're gonna add 0.25% to the levy. So then we'd be at 2.24. Which means 0.54 off of that, the mill rate would be 1.8. Is that right? Or I got that wrong? 2.24 minus 0.54. 1.7, sorry. And then plus 30,000 on sales tax revenue. Let me change them right now and see what it looks like.
Please.
Please.
Okay. It's like pulling teeth, not getting this done.
It's worse.
At least they give you Novocaine.
Hey, we're getting it done though.
I don't feel that.
I appreciate this.
It's been a good exercise so far.
Okay, there's that one. Not a whole lot of accounts to worry about, right?
Is our plan to vote on this Thursday?
I think we have to. I think there won't be
Yeah.
another meeting
Right, to
before
make
the-
by the 14th?
Right.
Yeah, that would be good.
Sure, you show up when all the fun's over.
Well, I was told that it was all done, and all I need to do is show up.
Believe it or not, we're pretty close.
Are you? That's
Yeah, you-
fantastic.
You get to be here for the drum roll.
Even better.
All right. We're done with rec complex, right?
Yes.
Don't mess with those numbers anymore. There's gonna be some impact on the water and the sewer funds. For the 1.5% increase, doesn't ask me, but it's gonna be pretty insignificant as far as that change. Let's see. This. All right. So here we see budget levels. See if the numbers come out good. Oh, in the wrong font.
So as you do that, and yes, Councilor Gibbs, I think we are almost there. I just want to kind of recap that you really worked hard to bring the spending down. Excuse me, I think our goal was to try to reduce spending by somewhere around $300,000 to $400,000, and you managed to do that. And with a only modest increase in the taxes that you had anticipated 6 months ago. So to do it mostly with just tightening our belt and sharpening our pencils, I think you've done terrific work on all that. Thank you.
So can I ask a summary while he's bringing this up for us? Can you give me a summary of some of the things that are going to be done?
Well, basically,
yes.
I'll let you explain.
Well, first of all, being very careful to try and anticipate all the various costs, because we recognize that without a fund balance to really fall back on, that we're really relying on any surpluses we generate here to take care of any uncertainties that might occur. So we've been really diligent to try to anticipate as much as we possibly can for next year. I think one of the biggest ones was the DPW has stocked up at a really good price in 2018 for salt, and I know salt is kind of a boring item, but for a municipality up here, that's actually a pretty big item.
Mm-hmm.
So we shaved almost $100,000 right in that category alone.
That's
And
fantastic.
that's a big chunk of the savings.
But we added it right back.
Hmm?
We added that amount back, it's pretty much the same amount, back to fire department overtime.
Right, we asked the two public safety departments, which you're chairing for next year, to really be diligent in trying to get some of these overtime costs down. And I think we had a realistic figure for that, and there was some optimism that they could reduce those costs a little bit as well. That was helpful.
We added 91,000 to the fire department.
514, Richard?
Because there were 204,000 over an overtime item
Yes,
this year.
without managers' raises.
And we're hoping Chief Wallace can keep it low, it's up to 400,000 from 309,000. We'll monitor that, hopefully he can get it in lower, maybe close to the 309,000. We'll see, but we want the budget to be accurate, reflect what realities are more than anything. And we're talking about a tax increase, which I still want to keep it at 1.99 myself. Small tax increase, what is it, 0.25%?
2.24.
2.24, 1.99, 2.25%, you're right.
That's very small.
Still
And
under
the other
tax
things being
cap.
discussed are a 1.5% raise for managers and a drafts person for
DPW.
Okay.
So I didn't put any number in there for the raises for the managers or DPW drafts person. And with the changes that we took, 89,720 out of snow and ice contract materials, added 0.25 to levy, and added $30,000 to sales tax.
Oh, yeah.
There were 514,810.
Could we maybe, as a council, look at, after we get through the first quarter of 19, maybe going in and looking at the drafts person position? Would that?
Now, a couple of things that I had emailed
No, I
to.
mean, I'm sorry. I'm just talking as a group. Is that something that you would feel comfortable with? Reassessing after the first quarter to see where we stand from a budgetary standpoint?
Councilor Kelly, one of the things I had emailed you and the mayor about was overtime. Is that anything that was talked about here?
Yes, it's talked about at length.
Extensively.
We believe we've budgeted proper numbers for police and fire, and those amounts are more than was budgeted last year, but less than was actually spent last year. So the goal for our two public safety officers is to control the overtime and deliver overtime within budget.
What about overtime in other departments? Was that discussed?
Those are by far and away the
Those are-
biggest overtime.
Well, I
categories,
realize that, but
Nope.
I'm just wondering if that was,
We're still 29,000 for the good for 2018,
Under budget?
for your department.
under budget.
Right.
That's public works.
I spent some time
So
today.
you need more like Mike.
I spent some time today looking at overtime, and I didn't even look at police, the fire department, or the public works. And saw approximately maybe I'm wrong, but approximately $200,000 in overtime. And then I also looked at contract services across all areas of budget and saw almost $1 million in contract services. So I wasn't sure. This is the reason why I asked this question of you last night, Richard. Wondered if there was any way to tighten the belt on those things. And I don't know if there is, but I thought.
Well, there may be potentially.
But I'm talking about across all areas. So instead of looking at a particular department to cut, is there a way, in that regard, is there a way to look at a percentage decrease so that not a particular area is the focus point?
But potentially, there could be savings there with the RFP that's going out to.
Okay, so here's the overtime numbers across the board. Actual for 17, budget for 18, actual for 18, and budget for 19.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Finance is high, And one of the reasons it's very high this year is
You're down a
because we've had a restructuring that's taken extra time for us to do, but we're looking at saving that next year. And also the salary that we didn't spend this year is covering this. I'd have to call that number up and show you that we've covered that, so. Central data processing, we've had the same issue. We're looking at much less next year because of the restructuring. Here's the police actual versus budget. Actual 17, budget 18, actual 18, budget 419. Like the mayor said, the lion's share of the overtime that we're looking at across all departments in the general fund is in the police and fire.
And
Totals on
just may I
843,000.
interject, we spent a lot of time talking to both chiefs and arrived at a compromise figure after listening to them and their explanations.
Now, the fire looks like it's going up, but there's a large, pretty sizable salary increase for next year because of the retro and the contract and all the compounding over the years. So that explains that why it's an actual increase, but the actual number of hours of overtime is going down for next year.
You'd add 12% to that overtime figure to cover for the raises. That would be required.
But also, going back to your question about contracted services, I think with sending out the RFP for telephone and internet services, that we could see some savings there.
Sure could.
We would hope.
You going back to overtime, Richard?
So the total budget of 557 was exceeded at 866, budgeting 842 next year, which looks like a more practical number. Most of the overage is because of the fire and the police. Street maintenance is under. Community development didn't budget any, but they do have some. Zoning's under, waste collection's over, parks and beautification's over. You can see across the board that,
Matt, what is your overtime?
That's for Shalice to attend the planning board meetings and meetings.
So we have to make sure that's budgeted next year. What was the other, you were looking at contract services?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is just the contract service line items in all the general fund departments. Once again, there's 17, 18 budget, 18 actual, and 19 budget.
What's the common council's contract service?
I think that's mostly advertising, common council.
Oh.
Notices for meetings and stuff.
That makes sense.
Okay. Assessment, that's legal fees for, what's it, Article 7? Is it 78? Challenges. What's that article number? I can never get that right. Property tax challenges. I don't know if it's 7 or 78. Anyway, one of the articles. But that's where that cost is escalated. We're getting more and more of those every year.
What's your contract services?
Those are legal fees?
Contract services to the finance office.
Yes.
Those are items like if we have to advertise for property taxes, or if we have to, well, I wish I could pull up my budget and show you the details.
I mean, it's not like it's a significant number.
Corporation counsel, contract services there as part of deeds fees, I believe, is considered contract services. Municipal buildings.
On top of the one.
Salary?
On,
Yeah. Yeah, the combination of contract services and salary gets into the rate that we agreed to with them. Central data processing, that's all of our application fees for software, lockbox processing. Tried to budget that lower this year, but it just, you know, the actual costs came in at 141,000 versus, you know, me saying I'll try and trim it. I couldn't get any cost reduced there. Better than 2017. Hopefully we're going to do better in 19 as well.
Let's go back to tax cases. I think you are right in that we are seeing a pattern of increased challenges, especially in commercial.
Yeah.
Do you feel we have enough set aside for next year for that?
At 13,700, probably not. Probably not. I think
we
that's
should
low.
probably beef that up.
Not sure what the schedule is for the commercial reassessment or the reassessment across the board. That would end that.
Right,
That would
and
end
that's
those
something we
challenges.
have talked about in the past. We do have reason to believe that if we get financial restructuring board money to do a commercial revaluation, it won't allow us to get to some of the past big settlements unless we do a citywide reval. But I believe that something to fund that would be forthcoming as well if we ask for it. But I think I would highly recommend that we look at getting a commercial reval done, because the assessor at the county does say that he'd be much more comfortable if we just had a good, strong base case to defend ourselves on.
His estimate was that commercial values are under by 2 to 3%.
Yeah.
Rough estimate.
And when do we have any, you said we would be able to apply for financial restructuring board money for that, or?
He specifically mentioned both those categories in almost all the conversations we have with him. So he's very receptive to that.
And that initial.
So then if we did that, we could probably just leave that figure there, the 13 for the challenges for legal fees?
I don't think, first of all, to do a reval
It's
takes
gonna
probably
be a
about a
year.
year. Wouldn't be completed in 2018, I don't think, but we.
What about 2019?
2019, I think that we could have it done for that.
If we started now, I think we could have it done for the year, right?
But I'm still worried about the level for those tax cases, and the judgment and claims level, or figure you had earlier too, seems somewhat low. You might want to
Trying
look
to
at
think,
both
what
of
did we
those.
spend this year?
Well, if we look at 17, we spent 33,000, we budgeted 6,508, and we spent 36,000.
Yeah. We budgeted 20.
And we budgeted 6,500.
65, right, okay.
I was projecting trying
20.
to stay at 2946 based on what we knew was out there, but I think we had additional cases come in. I'm not sure if 13,000 makes sense for 19 based on our trend. It looks like it should be in the 30, mid-30 range.
I agree.
Add 20
It's a big hit.
some thousand to it.
Better beef that up a little.
So should we add 20 to that?
Yes.
Sure. I'd rather deal with realistic budget.
All right. City clerk's pretty much right on the money.
So judgment and claims, what's in there?
Well, last year it was $777,000
Right.
for
For the firefighters.
2012 and 2013 fire increases of 2% compounded through the end of 17. What it would amount to, plus 37,000 in interest. This year, and there was also some settlement awards that we had to do on property taxes, where we actually have to refund taxes. That was that part of it. Now, this year I've added 118,000 for increasing that accrued liability for the 2018 share of those 2% compounded rate increases for the fire department, as well as 57,000 of interest, and there was already 40,000 of settlements that we had to do for property taxes. Since Skyway was one, McDonald's was another.
What do you recommend for next year?
Well, we said we were gonna put 271,000 aside for contingencies, which was includes 26,000 of interest for the fire raises. And we had 200,000 for retro for police.
So those are things we know
25,000
about.
retro
This
for
is the
asphalt.
category for things we don't know about that,
Right.
that seem to
Yep.
systematically occur each year in judgment and claims.
Yep. As far as the property tax items, we didn't put anything on this line for that. As far as, refunds, it's anybody's guess what those would come out to based on cases that were out there.
So
Could we put
excluding-
30,000 out of the 2.7 out of contingency into the tax assessment?
Well, the contingencies are things we absolutely know are going to occur.
Okay.
I'm wondering about the uncertainties,
Okay.
the large tax cases that seem to come up from time to time. Some of the things that are in the pipeline right now, although as you know, we've been whittling down those tax cases. We have fewer of them right now than we did a couple of years ago.
It's $29,000 worth in 17. And
But if we have fewer, we won't have to
41,000 in
budget
2008.
the same amount.
That's why you probably lower
Lower, right.
because of that. But there is one there's one that we worry about that's looming, that's not gonna hit in this year though, certainly.
At the Vilas homes?
No, well, that's coming up too.
But they're asking,
Yeah, they're asking for a reduction again. But no, there's always one big looming one that's still a couple of years away.
So add something to judgments and claims.
Yeah, what do you think, as a
Well, 29 and 17, 41 and 18. 35?
Yeah, I would say so.
We're gonna have to start looking for some other cuts someplace else, or increases in revenue. Judgments and claims, okay, so we'll add 35 in there, which is the average of the last 2 years.
I certainly appreciate what Councilor McFarland said, but you still do have room under the tax cap that we haven't exercised yet. We could discuss more scenarios around that.
So going further, the asset seizure doesn't impact the general fund. Whatever revenue and whatever expense you see from those items, it comes out of the reserve cash. So don't pay attention to that as far as being a budget impact. Fire, 95,000 versus 32,000. That question came up last night. That's the commissions that weren't budgeted for multi-million, at about 5,000 to 6,000 a month for ambulance collections. Got it budgeted for 2019.
Chief Ritter, regarding the animal control officer, I mean, it's been steadily budgeted at 19,000. I know in the past, probably it's been a year or so. When does our contract with Mr. Burgess expire?
I don't think that's Burgess in there. Or is it? Burgess was, I thought Burgess was on the other line. Let me see.
I believe it's the larger one.
And then we also have the contract with
Yeah, it's a
Elmore,
larger one.
isn't it? Some of that Elmore money?
Yeah,
That
this is for
shelter.
Miscellaneous.
Yeah.
So then what is this?
This is for animal care. When it
This
comes
is every
to,
time we take a seized dog, a lost dog, we bring it to Elmore. And it costs money. It's kind of like picking up TVs on the side of the road, not comparing animals. But it's an unpredicted expense that we absorb. That's what I'm trying to say.
I mean, I know it's not a significant amount, but it seems like we're tracking in the $12,000 to $13,000 range. Could we maybe budget it at 14 or 15? And it's not a lot, but it's a couple thousand
there's been
dollars.
years when we've hit 21, 25,000 on that.
Yep.
When you have a bad year, let's say you have
A lot of bad dogs.
no, you go into a home, like I
Yeah.
remember one on the south
Like
side, you
a
go into a home and you
foreclosed
have
home where there are animals everywhere that need expensive medical care.
30
Or
acres.
criminal investigations where it leads to a lot of animal care.
Okay.
And that's what it's
So-
budgeted
Tracking over what period of time now, Richard, did you say that, what, was that anomalous, that $21,000?
Well, let me just see. You're asking a question about that. We'll see how many details we can pull up.
I mean, it's not a great deal of money.
Well, I mean, but we keep adding, so we gotta reduce somewhere.
All right, so here is the current year and the last 3 years. So it has been
Yeah, in the
consistently low.
I mean, I would feel comfortable budgeting it at 14,000 and maybe take 5,000 off of that.
Would too.
Yeah, but the trend doesn't support that. I mean,
Sure it does.
Well,
It's budgeted at 19, it's been budgeted at 19, and it's been trending in the $11,000 and $12,000 range.
Right. We just had a couple of anomalous years. Prior to this, say, in the prior 5 years, was it 21,000 and 25,000? I'd have to pull those histories up.
Right, we had a house of
Yep.
Like-
You can find 30 animals.
30 animals, right.
So once again, with this year, it's been discussed to take 3,000 of this year's money and allocate that towards, what's the name of that group?
Mhm.
Trap new release.
Yeah. So that would make it 16,000.
Right. So, you know, again, I would still be in favor of making that 15.
15 sounds good.
Okay, so we'll take 4,000 off of that, okay?
But if we're gonna give the feral cat people 3,000, then that would make that
Well, that was this
16,000.
year. Let's see how it continues to track.
Yeah. Okay, building inspector, not a lot there. Street maintenance, staying within it there. Community development, now this number, you have to take all of the encumbrances out for White Group, Crane Associates, and Saratoga Associates.
All the DRI money that we spent thus
Right.
far that is yet to be reimbursed is included in that.
Right, and the open POs
Okay.
are in there too.
Well, that's significant then.
Yeah, we're adjusting that down. The way we're adjusting that down is everything we've actually spent is gonna go into a receivable, because Matt says that we have a 100% chance of getting that money back. And the encumbrances that are out there, we're gonna have to modify those to close them out so they're not costed against any year, and then we'll start them up again next year to keep gathering the costs that way. So,
projections.
if I could pull up the numbers that I did on that budget adjustment.
Can I ask then, can I ask a question then? Is within the 2019 revenue budget, is that money, the DRI money being
No.
included
No.
against
No.
these expenses?
No.
The numbers we saw earlier about the surplus being.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it?
They were already adjusted out.
Want to do
They
that?
were
Wouldn't we?
adjusted out,
I mean, if we've expended that, wouldn't we want to include the DRI money into the calculation for revenue?
Right, but weren't you saying it's going into an account?
We're gonna put the actual spending through the end of 2018, which we still have to get the December costs. I think we've got Crane zeroed out for all of his costs, but we need White Group and we need Saratoga's December costs to post them. Then once we have all those costs gathered, we're gonna put them into a receivable. Credit this and debit receivables, because we're gonna say that's coming from the DRI. And then we'll unencumber the open POs for the balance of White Group and Saratoga, take it up right out of here, so that you'll have the actual expenses for CD in there. And I can't remember, it's I think roughly, I think it's over, I think it's about 20-some thousand is
Yeah.
the actual contract service expenses without those big pops in there.
But Councilor Ansel was asking, then we'd have in that receivables account, that generates a revenue for the city, so.
It's just gonna be receivable based on the revenue we're going to collect once we get reimbursed for those costs.
Right,
But wouldn't that be
expensing
part,
those.
exactly, we've already expensed them out.
Right.
It's not gonna give us a revenue item, it's gonna give us a reimbursement of spent costs.
But it's gonna.
But it'd be
isn't
for
gonna help-
19 instead, and that we've expensed it on
It will be a
18.
reimbursement for spent costs, so it's gonna be debit cash, credit receivables, no impact on revenue. Okay? I'd like to say we'd have a revenue increase there so we can say we're getting.
No, I mean, I'm just, that's, my
higher-
question was, we've expensed it on 18, but yet,
No, it's not gonna be expensed on 18. Once again, it's gonna be a credit out of these expenses and put into a debit and receivables as a collectible item once the DRI funds are applied for. And when they come in, we're gonna put it in cash and we're gonna credit out the receivable. The big thing to remember is we're out that cash in the general fund. The actual cash is gone. I mean, we had to spend the cash to do these upfront costs, but that's the way the DRI works. You gotta spend it first and then wait 6 months to get it back.
Is that how the city usually accounts for grant funding, or is it just the particular size of this grant necessitates doing it this way?
The strange part about this one is it's no asset for the city. Normally, we would do this through a capital project.
Okay.
When there's gonna be a city asset. There's no city asset here at all, because this is just consulting costs to develop the DRI plan for a developer to come in and work on Durkee Street as a new investment, which is gonna be their asset, not the city's.
Right.
So that's one of the anomalies about this. It's a strange bird, so I said I'm gonna put it in there, it's gonna look like a sore thumb all year. Come the end of the year, we'll know what the costs are, we'll credit out the expenses. And like I said, if I could pull up my other worksheet from this workstation, I'm not sure if Beth had that somewhere here. I can show you what those actual expenses look like.
Shared file you plan?
The one that you had up last night for the,
Yep.
that's on here somewhere? All right. Beth, I didn't even see you over there. Yeah.
So what kind of figure are we looking at now that we still need to cut in terms of money?
I'd like to see the bottom line.
Yeah, well, I mean, where are we
I
now?
think we're in the neighborhood, I think we're probably in around the 15 to 20,000, because we were at 514, and then we added 30,000, so we're in the 15 to $16,000 range. If we wanted to hit the magical 500,000 that we talked about as a target for reserve.
There we go. Okay, so. And 27,000 is CD's actual contract service costs against the 11,400. Because it went in there and took out 128, 225 for Crane, 224, 880 for Saratoga, and I think 300,000 for White, and another 21.5 for Crane.
Yeah, that's what you had on the projected 2018 on the one before. So it's still a little over twice what was budgeted.
Projected.
Yeah,
27, 7.
Yep.
The 2018 projection.
Ah, look at that. Jeez, sometimes I get good numbers, don't I? It's great when they tie out from one sheet to the next, because then you know we're not just making this stuff up. Yeah, and see, I have some notes over here to put White, Saratoga, and Crane's actual costs together, because what I've taken out of here, you see these numbers up here, that's their encumbrances. There's been actual spending against those POs. That's the total the POs put in there. It's a pretty big number. Number itself for those three POs is $675,000. So, anyway, back to the contract services.
Richard?
Yes.
Go back to Public Works, street maintenance, see it? We just see an increase, we went from 86,809 to 132.
Yes.
Because we gotta do our,
Striping?
our striping and our
Crack sealing.
Right?
Yep.
We cut it back the last couple of
Yep.
years, 'cause we weren't doing it.
Yep.
The DOT is demanding anything, so we got to do that. That's why that's increased.
Gotcha. Did I
Basically,
steal your pen, Beth?
I used to have 130 just to crack sealing alone, but we got to take it back to 80.
No.
Our actual number in 2018 reflects low because we did do the epoxy marking. We got late in the season. We tried to get a contractor to do it, but no one bid on the project. So that's why we're well under what we had budgeted previously.
But you gotta leave this 132 there, you can't mess with it.
Exactly, but the new counselors are probably gonna ask that question. You're probably wondering why there's a big disparity there, and that's the reason why.
You haven't done crack sealing for several years.
That's correct.
Striping we do just when we do some paving.
This year
Mostly.
we did, we
Yeah.
did the hotline, which is the center line, and the county does that for us at a very economical rate. But the epoxy, stop bars, arrows, specialty markings, that's the real high price stuff.
Now, when we look at Penfield Park, I think we have all the parks numbers under one park this year. And I think that's why that's such a big number.
I was gonna say, what is the contracted services, Matt, for the different parks with
Sorry?
contracted services for the different parks?
Where were we?
Right?
Okay.
We have to look it up.
I would have to check.
Yeah, we've got all the parks combined into one set of account numbers this year.
I know some of it was for repairs to some of the facilities. There was 5K for repairs to the barn roof, 3K for repairs to the lights at Penfield Park.
There was one that had to have the bathrooms repaired. too.
Yeah,
Penfield.
bathroom repairs is always at least one issue every month with the bathroom in one of the
Right,
parks.
in Penfield.
Yeah.
Richard, is the library up there? Because I thought when I looked at the budget, I saw a pretty large figure for the library.
Not for contract services,
Not for
for funds transferred, yes, I'll show you what that is. All right.
I think that there's a huge
Go down
increase.
here into the lower depths of the expenses where you have debt service transfer, and you have a transfer that we have to do for matching the aerial fire truck. And we have 631,000 we said we're sending over to recreation. We just increased that by 54,770 because the revenue projections are lower. And the library is 751,458.
They've been maintaining solid, that's a separate fund that we are obligated by the state of New York to provide to them.
They've been staying consistent within that amount of transfer within their budget, managing the numbers very well.
Very good management of their funds.
And it's good to keep that number consistent because Ann can explain to you that if we drop it by more than 5% in a given year, there's
Over,
a bunch of funding.
over 2 years.
Over 2
then
years.
the state will penalize us and we'll lose 20% of our state funding. So, I explained that to them, that it had been up and down for a few years and not to go back and penalize us for the few years when it's extraordinarily high, prior to my coming. But I think, were you asking perhaps about the library contracted services, which is quite high? Because I know that always comes up.
I think I was. I'm trying to find it on my own copy that I
Okay.
highlighted.
Just to let you
Page
know-
41, no wonder I can't find it.
It's deep in
It is, I knew it was in there, but. Yes, that is what I was
40,000.
looking at. Mm-hmm.
Because just the elevator contract alone is $4,760. We pay about $5,000 for the HVAC system for a service contract and upgrades. Our computer technology librarian is $3,500. We have fire alarm testing, fire alarm maintenance, fire alarm security system is in there. We have a couple of other, the boiler inspection from the insurance company is $100. What the other expenses are, there was one for Prime Link for some upgrades for $2,500. And then sometimes we had some temp employment for a while when we weren't paying a full-time person, so it was $5,000 in temp payroll, but that's offset essentially in our budget. So there are things that, I know this has come up in the past, that this is just where they are placed within the budget, and they're not, they're all necessary expenses.
Okay.
I know it looks like, what are you doing with contractor for $35,000 or something, but again, those are all things that are really out of our control, and a lot of it has to do with the board.
So I pulled up the library budget, and the library's operating expenses are in this section right here.
Yeah, that's what I was looking
And
at.
the contract services, 36,000, 17, 40,000, revised to 45, 36 actual spending in 18, and 45,000 budgeted for 19.
It's another example of an investment that the city residents make in a county-wide asset.
Mm-hmm. But we're
Much like
required,
trade center
we're required to have a
programs.
library.
We do get $100,000 from the state though for being the central library, which means that we offer the same services to anyone within the Clinton Essex Franklin County system. So that $100,000 is, I guess, considered an offset by the state library, or by the state. And just to reiterate, there's $4,600 that we pay into the library system that we belong to maintain the database, the patron database and circulation system and the services that they provide for us. And that's just actually gone up to, I think, $4,800.
And that's budgeted for 107,260 in 2019 for the state aid. And you can see where the city's revenue is to the library is the mainstay of their budget.
I don't mean to nickel and dime, but I guess I am. I see the contracted services with the library over the past couple of years. It's been, to your credit, it's come in under budgeted, but it's been projected at 45,000 and it's come in 36, 40, or 36. Perhaps could we maybe go to 40,000 for 2019? That'd be another 5,000.
That's things that we can't control. I mean, we just spent $1,400 on this little tiny control for the HVAC system. So the building is very expensive, and we have roof leaks, there's always something that's coming up on the building, and that doesn't have contracted services because we hire people to come in and do that. So we really had to scramble to meet the same 751 for this year because of the $600 a month increase in IT services for us, healthcare, Social Security, Rich, we went back and forth. Rich is officially our treasurer. And we made cuts to everything from the book budget to conferences, to be able to maintain that same level of a request to the council of 751. So we really, any more cuts or drops in that amount would necessitate cuts to our operations.
Well, even with that though, you'd still come in $4,000 under what would have been on the one. I'm just talking about the contracted services.
But like this year,
They're
we're way over on
cover the
IT.
IT increase.
So things change. Our electric is $12,000 a month in the winter. I mean, there are things that are out of our control. So in the end, because the library board actually manages this budget once the city makes an appropriation to the library, within the operation throughout the year with Rich, they do move funds from one line to another in order to make it all work. So, again, it's like anything with a big old building. We've gotten over $500,000 in construction grant funding from the state, but we have a match for that. So there really is, you'd actually be saying, could we just drop your appropriation by $4,000?
That's the only thing we have any authority of doing is that appropriation,
Right.
not these individual
Not
items
the
here.
line items.
Okay.
And that would be very difficult. We'd probably have to cut our budget again. We already cut about $11,000 for this year to make up the unexpected costs.
We put the books under materials and supplies, right?
Yes, and that actually is
Look at that.
misleading because that's
been
all the supplies for the books and all the barcodes and the security strips and all that. So that's not even actual purchases that are included in that amount.
And their projected expenditures for operations is budgeted, what, 20,000 less?
Less. Okay. No, that's fine. I'm satisfied with that explanation.
Pardon?
Do you feel that tunnel?
That's not our tunnel.
Wow.
Our property stops at the edge of the building, and there's a tunnel that goes to the building next door. that drive, which the city graciously plows, even though we should charge those folks, they own that tunnel, and the road above it is collapsing, and I've been after them since I came and made myself very unpopular with their former director, but they say they're going to fix it, they say they're going to put beam in the middle, and that would be the solution, which is sort of insane, and I've been asking them about paving it, because it's horrible. But that's, you know, these guys came and patched this huge hole that was there. Thank you.
So they were claiming that the city owned the tunnel.
They felt that we should go in on it together, and I said, that's not my property, that's not my liability.
What is it about bridges and tunnels?
And our part is actually the best part, and theirs it's just downhill from there, so. But they have trees growing on them, which we don't, so.
So we're looking at Richard now, I guess. I'm going back to the overall budget. We're looking at,
Are we done looking at the library?
yeah, I am. I don't know, I can't speak for.
Counselor Gibbs, are we done with looking at the library?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we
Thank
done
you.
looking at contract, no, it's any, you know, on contract services? Are we done looking at those?
I think
So
so.
you-
Yeah, it's gonna go- So I think we're looking at trying to find $16,000 somewhere at this point.
Like to go look at the bottom line again, if you don't
Well,
mind.
I got 3 changes to make though.
You wanna do those 3 changes?
Changes and,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
All right.
I
Yes,
think,
please,
yeah.
Done with contract services, done with overtime?
for now.
Nothing's gassed in stuff.
I mean, overtime, it's so hard to cut because you do it and then it comes over
It
budget.
comes right.
Right.
I agree with Peter. Let's admonish everybody,
Stay within.
stay below it and get lower. But if we cut it, it's just gonna be over budget.
It's a
And,
false budgeting.
Okay, so 13,700, I think was the number that we had to change.
Thank you, Ann.
And does a great job on your numbers. 35,000 on judgments and claims, right? What the hell number is that?
Was it 35 or 30?
35. Here's 1193.
here, what is your
And we're gonna take off
What is your cell phone?
4,000.
contact information? So we can talk about or he's reloading your computer.
572. 205.
So I'd like to be able to meet before our actual meeting. We have a huge department that we're gonna be running together now, or a huge committee, I should say. So I will
All right.
text you with some dates and times and see if we can try and get together a few times before we meet. Okay. It's 518, 593, 2995. Okay, thanks.
Augustine's maxed out during works at the water plant.
So many people I don't talk.
Yeah, me too.
All right, your bottom line, 463,810. And that's without anything in there for managers' raises.
So we're at 450, so we're looking at 250,000.
It's pretty close to 500,000. So you were saying, say again what you said, Peter, I couldn't hear you fully.
No, I'm just saying, I guess I'm just speaking for myself. I feel a lot more, I know it's close, but I still feel more comfortable with the $500,000 figure if we could find $50,000 somewhere.
Are you just exploring going closer to the tax cap?
Well,
No,
I
I don't wanna do that.
I don't want to do that either.
I don't even want to raise it to the 2.24 or whatever it is.
2.24.
That's where we are with that right now.
Right.
2.24
2.24.
Yeah,
at this rate.
come on.
That works out to 1.7% mill rate increase.
Yes. Yeah, it rounds it to 2.2, but it is 2.2399.
So you were willing to go up to 1.99% mill rate increase earlier, if you recall. So you do still have that latitude. You still would be under a 2% mill rate increase. Remember, the tax base goes up because of new properties coming online, et cetera. The question is, how much does the average taxpayer feel in their pocket?
Mhm.
And so that's, came up with a number of 1.99 earlier, so you can still go up another 25 basis points and still stay under the 2% mill rate increase, if you're willing to explore that.
Are we willing to do that? Go to 1.99%
No.
mill rate? Keep it where it is?
Let's keep it.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
That would be a 2.53.
It's your call.
Levy increase. Okay, so.
So we need to find close to 50.
And we
$50,000.
say that
Oh.
18.
Chief?
In my budget, you've got 4440 account fees for services, that's legal fees.
Yes.
Since we just settled the contract and arbitration isn't moving, is that something we could lower? 15,000?
You know, that's got potential because
I don't see any, we have
most
things in litigation that are at the final stage.
most of the legal costs that we've been recognizing there
Right.
are for arbitrations, general grievances that the fire department put together, but the majority of it has been, I guess in the past year and a half, has been for the, it's been for the settlement, the challenge of the settlement, the appeal. Let's see what the
There's
actual
very
cost
little cost we can expect now. Most of the legal work's now been done for both the Manny clause and the appeal of the arbitration.
So we actually spent $64,000 in 2017. We've only spent $59,191. Budgeted $80,750. We dropped the budget down to $65,000 in 2019, anticipating that going down.
So, can you promise no more grievances next year?
Well, I just don't see, because we're going to arbitration, and that was a large part of it.
Yep.
In the appeals, like we talked about, that's all the heavy work's been done.
Yeah. I think that could come down.
How much?
I want to lower that.
Take off
How-
15,000.
15?
15, I think, would be,
I think you may be able to go deeper than 15. I think you can go 25 or 30 actually, because 65,000, I don't anticipate using anywhere near that this upcoming year.
Could we go 30?
Could we go 30, Chief?
yeah, I mean, as long as we don't have any major legal issues, which we're in contract now. Most of our grievances, we try to handle that step one or step two. Come to a compromise.
I would,
I think it's an excellent idea.
yeah.
Let's do it.
If you're comfortable with it, then I think that that's something we should do. So if we go to 30, is that what we're
Richard?
If we go to 30,
No, we need 20. We need to find 20.
20,000. What did you say?
So we need to find 20. Richard, take 30 off the legal fire.
Down to 35, huh? Sure about that?
Well,
Are you guys
we're taking the
picture?
chief's word for it.
Yeah, but that's a litigious group, you know, they would love.
That's, you just
Well,
want
the
to
chief's
get
also
that
gonna
dig
keep his
in.
overtime lower than what's budgeted now, right? So it's,
If it's not one thing, it's another with those guys. He used to keep score on grievances. Fire department 35, city 1, I remember, you know. Yeah, it was one a month. Oh, Williams got, well, he lost all his hair.
Okay, this isn't a roast, Richard. This is a
Okay,
budget hearing.
I guess I'm just gonna throw this out there.
If you guys are comfortable with going down to 35, I'll do it.
Yeah,
promised
we'll
to
eat
be
crow
good
if
for
we're
next
wrong.
year.
How about that?
The chief suggested it. so.
She's third down, okay.
Okay, the
So I
chief
guess
will
I'm
grow.
gonna ask the department heads, I know, I probably know my answer. Can you find anywhere that, I mean, now we're down to just $20,000 that you could find $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 somewhere in your budgets?
I think
And this is without a managerial raise, you're asking them to do this?
Matt, you can give us 8?
Really?
Why aren't we looking at overtime?
Yeah, we had budgeted for
We can talk
Bill
about
Boss to be working all year.
Everybody else got a raise.
Okay.
He took
I'm
the
talking
new
about
positions
costs,
downtown
it's
labor,
not just
because he
even
works
doing
primarily on the parks, it's not our
overtime.
intention to hire a
Other
replacement for him
departments.
until the spring,
I mean,
so
not these guys.
1 quarter of
I
his
think-
annual salary was
I feel comfortable with
$70,000.
what the explanation we've gotten. We're sorry
So
you
that would come
couldn't
out where?
be here.
Direct complex
for it.
admin, regular pay.
So reduce that and then also reduce the contributions from the general fund again?
No, it would just be coming from a different place, because Bill's basically getting paid out of the parking fund now.
But you're saying to reduce rec complex, and the only way that's gonna affect the general fund is to have it reduce the contribution to the rec complex from the general fund. So that's what I said. Reduce rec complex 8, which reduces the contribution by 8.
Yeah.
So, that's a gyration, but is that legit? I mean,
No, that's legit, we're not planning on hiring anybody until it's, makes sense to hire somebody to work outside the parks.
So that's a temporary cut though, right?
For 3.5 hours.
So-
Seems like you could have led with.
But the following year, you're gonna need that to go back up, correct? This is
Correct.
a one-time.
I know we can't
It's a one-time
calculate
cut.
this.
Yeah, but
I mean, it's a temporary cut, it'll get us through 2019.
You said it was significant dollars.
Can we find 12 somewhere?
You can, okay.
Yeah, better not
Well,
say.
it's not part of the conversation anyway, it's just an aside.
It could be.
you sure
Could
about
be
that? Matt?
significant.
Comfortable with that? Okay.
All right. If you're wrong, you'll find you.
All right, so ask for some more, this is a gyration I have to go through here, so.
Yeah, so if there's one more cut we can make, he can revise it while it's in there right now.
Right.
Elizabeth wants to
Rec complex.
So we're not giving the drafter?
more potential for cutting.
I would say that my idea would be, let's see how we're projecting through the first quarter and then approach that.
I hope Andrew doesn't die of exhaustion.
Should we go there? Yeah, I think we should.
All right.
What's that, Mike?
Elizabeth here has raised the question of, some of the other departments have overtime, and she wonders if it's possible to get some savings by reducing overtime in those other departments.
And I
Not eliminate, can we reduce it anyway?
I think we should, and it's so hard to budget that, because then we come back here and we're over and over time.
Well, that's right, there are so
budget.
many variables that
Right.
count, and then they're really
With
kind of
DPW, it's
unique
the
to
weather.
each department.
Because like, you know, if we lower the fire department to what it was before, and then we come in here and we're doing a $204,000 transfer because I mean, we can always just lower overtime and then our budget looks better, but is it honest? I guess is the question.
But there might be ways, like for instance, I think we talked about the planning committee. Could we have somebody come in later and stay later instead of having a long day with overtime? Are there things we can do like that?
Oh,
Yeah, like those kind of ideas
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Make
staffing
changes, yeah.
adjustments.
Making staffing adjustments.
Yeah.
We need to find $12,000 essentially.
And I think that's the reason Peter's like, let's wait and see how our overtime
Time is
doing.
going
Because
to
if
address the
we
draft.
finger wag at the managers now and be like, get that down, and if we do, then we'll have things. I say we give them that down.
Managers, do you see a way to adjust when people come in and leave in ways like probably not so much for you guys because your overtime is more like snow, but if we know like somebody has to cover a meeting, could they come in later and stay later, for instance, rather than do overtime?
Possibly, but you're talking about $1,000.
And for like planning board.
Yeah. Joe, what about with you with planning or zoning board?
Yeah, I agree with Matt. $1,000. I don't think there's a shift time that their contract requires them to start between. I think.
Yeah, they asked me contracting and it's start time and time.
I think we should definitely tell the managers we're gonna be looking at overtime, and please come up with innovative ways to lower your overtime, but if we lower it now, it's just
There
like
is.
accounting. Go ahead, Mike.
Why don't you get off the overtime, go back to, street maintenance, and go back to our striping, line item, instead of 132, drop it down to 120. Now we're done.
Hey,
No.
here's the silver bullet we were hoping for, guys.
So you've been doing this stuff late Friday afternoon, huh?
Thank you, Mike and Mike.
So let's go one more hour.
So after the first quarter, when DPW saves the appropriate amount of
Money.
overtime,
Then we're looking at a drafts person.
I just don't want to hear about the other departments going over on their overtime. And us being,
Okay, good point.
My beers get warm.
Yeah. TGI.
I think Bobby will keep you a cold one.
You're usually gone by now, aren't you, Mike? 3 o'clock on Friday. Really? All right, so you're saying to drop it to
120
132 to 120.
for striping.
That makes it a nice round 500.
well,
Yes.
where we are right now is at
But then we're not done.
501 right now.
1810.
502.
So if we add 12,000 to that, it's gonna be 514, call it, and then we got about 14 on the managers, I believe.
With the manager's raises.
I
I'm
think
comfortable with that.
think
I don't
it's
know about
14.
anybody
don't know.
else.
I am comfortable with
I'm-
managers' raises.
Yep.
After Mike's show there, yeah. let's do it. When was the last time managers got a raise, Rich?
Actual pay raise to their scale, 2012.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
there's been 2 actual scale changes since 2008. And, well, excuse me, in
And I don't think
2007.
Emily was here for the,
Emily?
Elizabeth was here when you estimated the
One was in
cost.
2008 or 2009, and one was 2012.
18K,
So,
18K.
yeah, and I think that I actually included fire and police.
But that
They're
was
budgets.
only half of that, correct?
No, we started out with a different
36,
number, and
right.
because of the 30%.
So we'll take 12,000 off this line item right here. Gonna go do it.
Well, kid, you
Just
gotta
no more
drink
raises for
more
another
water.
6 years.
Drying up.
Me?
Did you hear that, Mike?
Yeah, I have some.
Said no more raises for you for 6 years.
You don't have to worry about me. I'll be on.
I have my doubts on that. You're going
So we're
strong.
at what again? 5?
514?
514?
See down here at the bottom. Should give us that number.
And we're still at this rate?
513,810.
Levy, I mean.
514, and then I'm comfortable with that.
That's, I don't know why that looks like a
Can't
5.
speak about
It's supposed to
anybody
be-
else.
I guess it
The
wasn't.
headline.
Good.
Say raises taxes. Gives managers-
But under the tax cap.
Not having any increase.
Yeah.
That would have been incredibly optimistic.
But well under what we could have gone with the tax cut.
Yeah.
And nobody lost a job
Right.
after Christmas.
That was a universal goal.
Yeah,
It's
so
like the guy
that's
said
important.
when he fell off the top of the 12-story building and looked in every window. So far, so good, he kept saying on the way down. Nobody's lost a job yet. So far,
That
so
is a
good.
terrible analogy.
You're like a ray of sunlight.
Black cloud,
It's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, Richard.
dark cloud.
Please.
Wow, it's been an amazing process.
Well, I'm glad you guys
Richard, thank you.
took the time to do this, and this makes it easy to do a tax levy next week and actually take some time to think about it and make sure we're right with it. So right now, we're looking at a surplus of $513,810.10. I can round that off on the property tax levy to make it an even,
514.
and maybe, yeah.
I
514.
personally like to thank all the department heads for
No.
staying with us throughout this process and
About 500.
your cooperation and willingness to work with us on this. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
So everybody happy with it?
And that's that's 2.24, correct?
Yes, but if I,
Well,
yeah,
it's
that's
a heck of a lot better than I thought.
2.2399.
Me too.
right now, so.
Just last week, we thought it was gonna be bad.
Yeah.
Are union members allowed to use comp time instead of overtime? Move overtime? Can we just do it that way instead with things like planning?
They're allowed to use it, but it can't be required.
I see.
We stopped it in the finance office since it's such a small crew. The more time they took off to get paid for their overtime, the more overtime required to do it. It just was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Where, I looked at one person being out
We
a
allow,
ridiculous amount of time.
we allow public work to get to work the overtime, and if they want to comp time instead of getting paid, they use them.
Yeah, with a bigger crew, with a bigger crew.
Larger
you can make it
departments
work.
can have that flexibility.
Police department does it a lot too. They use comp time for overtime. And it works because they have a large crew of people. Small crew of people doesn't work. I don't know, Joe, if it would work for you or not. If people worked overtime, you gave them time off, would it lead to more overtime? Instead of just paying them.
Yeah, they can choose comp time, but we can't require them to take comp time.
No, I know. We can't afford
Can you
to pay
suggest it?
them. We can't afford to give them the comp time because it leads to too much extra overtime. You just don't get the work done. Like in a week like this, we still have 6 days worth of work to get done in 3 days. So if you have someone taking comp time off, you just screw them.
Colin, do you know if this tax rate is below the current rate of inflation?
The mill rate increase of 1.7%?
Yes.
I think it is slightly below the rate of inflation.
Good.
Certainly right around the rate of inflation. So I think it's a fair statement to say that the property taxes haven't increased beyond the rate of inflation. And you've eked out a $500,000 surplus to replenish our fund balance.
Excellent.
We took a look at that CPI through end of November of 18, I think it was what, 1.9%?
It's right around there, yeah.
Yeah. It was at 2.3, but I think it dropped in November, 5.4.
Is everyone on the council happy with what we've done at this point?
Yes,
I am.
You think we can do more?
I think we should call it. I think we did a lot.
Yeah,
Think-
I'll to adjourn.
Perfect.
Second.
Third.
Motion to adjourn.
Who was the first, sorry?
1, 2.
I can send you the numbers, you can look at them again and see if you see anything else.
I need roll call.
That'd be nice. That'd be really good.
All right?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Excuse me. Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Good
I'll
work,
send it to
everybody.
Mike, you're the committee, and you're the committee. Send it
Thank you all very much.
I'm gonna send you an updated version of what he just did, all the corrected numbers.
Now I gotta go have lunch.
Yeah. We did it.
I know we
That's
could.
really, really good.
That's what I said to you. We can use the will.
Considering all the liabilities, we retired. I'm surprised it came out.
What guys?
You guys posted the show on the screen.
I did?
Three guys, yeah, because you came in at 2:30. You guys get a better feel for what the numbers are? I mean, going up and down, what they relate.
That was much.
Because everybody keeps saying the numbers report something that was simple as hell.
I understand the reports, but it's nice to like.
Nice to have it in front of you.
I think I'm getting it.
All right.
I bet you're getting it better than you did a week ago.
Absolutely. Did you get my text?
I think the Friday afternoon.
Okay.
Anybody up there?
Kind of was.
Are you buying? Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Process for next year, this worked out really well.
No, I gotta go home. I'm sorry, I've been working all day. But thank you. I've been working all day.
Yeah, pulling teeth without the Novocaine, you said. Alrighty, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, Patrick's always up for.
Michelle, you got 2 minutes? The thing that Richard brought up yesterday.
Thank you.
As far as pay scale under the new thing, I just wanted to get you and Peter.
We're just trying to coordinate this. Do you want to meet before that 10th? Because the 10th is next Thursday and committees have to do with magic.
So, this is the pay scale.
Still need to,
This is the language that was.
And then we, because I'm pretty sure.
So the current manager is